I don't understand music, I can't dance, I'm not good at writing, I'm not proficient in calligraphy, and I'm not good at drawing. I am an actor, Su Rong. QQ Group 767240043 Keywords of the novel. Entertainment. I am just an actor without pop-ups, entertainment. I am just an actor. Download the complete TXT collection, entertainment. I am just an actor. Read the latest chapters. Chapter 1. Boarding. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Boarding in May 2004, Kyrgyz Province. Xiao Su, take a tie of silk. Su Rong squatted on the crisscrossing steel mesh, handed the hook from his right hand to his left hand, lifted his dirty sleeve, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and casually grabbed a thin iron wire about 20 centimeters long from his feet, handing it to the middle-aged man shouting at him, saying, "Uncle Lu, here you are. Xiao Su, take the bucket of water." "Okay, uncle." Su Rong responded, picked up the nearby bucket, turned a corner, and descended the uneven cement stairs. Carrying an empty bucket and urinating on the second floor, Su Rong climbed out of the scaffolding and headed straight to a row of makeshift houses not far from the construction building. From the large iron pot on the stove, Su Rong filled a bucket of steaming hot water and was about to pick it up when he looked at his gray and lacquered face on the water, his expression wandering. He pursed his lips and secretly encouraged himself. If you persist a little longer and earn money, you can go to college. Ding. Loading completed. The acting training system is activated. The sudden crisp sound in his ears stunned him. He turned his head and looked around. No one. After a moment of pause, he seemed to remember something. With a slight movement of his mind, a screen of light that only he could see appeared before him. What was displayed on the screen was no longer the previous progress bar, but rows of data. Performance Training System Name. Su Rong Emoji. E-Line. E-Limbs. E-Eyes. D-Rhythm. E-Comprehensive Evaluation. E+ Experience Value. 99 out of 100 Honor Value. 25 out of 100 Trait. None. Is this something that has been loaded for 17 years? Su Rong is not sure how this acting training system came about. He only knows that since he remembered, a green progress bar has been in his consciousness and has been showing loading. He once told his grandfather when he was a child, but after he finished listening, he didn't say a word. But he turned around and invited the godmother from the east of the village to come over and pour him a bowl of black paper gray water. Since then, he has understood that the existence of this thing cannot be told to others. Later, over time, he didn't realize that this thing had any abnormal impact on himself, so he forgot about it. After the Chinese New Year this year, in order to raise funds for attending university, he had to follow his uncle from the village to the construction site and became a great socialist builder. A migrant worker. Looking at the content on the screen, he vaguely guessed the purpose of this system. However, workers still have to work. Carrying a bucket of boiling water, Su Rong carefully avoided the scattered iron nails and cement blocks on the ground and drilled through the scaffolding. At the moment when he lowered his head, he caught a glimpse of several middle-aged men wearing yellow safety helmets not far away, among whom the leader was the construction site foreman, Mr. Lu. I couldn't help but wonder, is it difficult to check again? Because during regular inspections, only 2 technicians wear safety helmets on the entire construction site. But whether to check or not has nothing to do with him. He just needs to work. Thinking so, he turned his head and headed straight down the stairs to the 6th floor. Here comes the water. Attention everyone, everyone come down first, everyone come down first. Su Ronggang took 2 sips of warm water from his blue plastic water cup and heard Mr. Lu arguing below. He took a few steps and reached the edge of the steel mesh, holding onto the scaffolding and taking a glance down. I saw Mr. Lu shouting at the entire building with a loudspeaker, and beside him stood a middle-aged man with his clothes half round and two lower bellies propped up. "What's going on?" 80% of the carpenters made a mistake again. "Let's go down and take a look." Following the people downstairs, they arrived at the makeshift house and saw that almost everyone on the construction site had arrived. Rong realized that it was not the carpenter who had placed the shell wrong, because there was no need to call everyone in. The foreman just notified them. Mr. Liu, wearing a white short-sleeved checkered shirt with a big belly, shouted, "This is the director Guanhu. Today, we are here at our construction site to select actors to shoot a TV drama. Have you signed up?" Speaking, he pointed his chubby thumb at the middle-aged man wearing a black coat next to him. Rong's heart twitched as he carefully glanced at the person named Guanhu, who was very tall, with a beard and black-framed eyes. He didn't say a word. He works 1 day at the construction site for 30 yuan. 80 in a day, manage food and accommodation. I signed up. A young man with long hair among the carpenters raised his hand and asked with a chuckle, "Can it be on TV?" Guanhu grinned and said, "If you choose it, you will definitely be able to join." The carpenter said without hesitation, "Then I'll sign up." Guanhu did not immediately respond, but instead said, "You can act and let me see, for example, you are very angry with me and want to take action but dare not. Just leave it here. Right here." Standing at the back of the crowd, Rong couldn't see the young carpenter's face. He took 2 steps forward with his fist in hand, but in less than a few seconds, Guanhu shook his head and said, "No way." That year, the light carpenter shrank his neck, blushed slightly, and grinned as he crawled back into the crowd. "Is there anything else?" 80 a day, take care of food and accommodation. Rong hesitated for a moment, then slowly raised his hand and shouted, "I'm registering." Bang! "Xiao Su, what are you doing?" Rong stumbled and turned to see Uncle Lu kicking him beside him. He smiled and patted his buttocks, saying, "I also want to give it a try." When Rong walked up to him, Guanhu looked up and down at him and asked, "You're not very old, are you?" "This year is 17. Just like before, play and let me see." Rong nodded and said, "Middle." He took a deep breath and recalled the angry emotions of being bullied by his peers in the village when he was a child. He clenched his fists slowly, gritted his teeth, and stared intently at Guanhu. Guanhu only looked for about 3 seconds before nodding and saying, "Sure." "Ah." Rong was stunned. He just gave it a try with a playful mindset, and surprisingly, it really succeeded. "Well, go wait behind." After Guanhu said a few words, he didn't pay attention to him anymore and turned to ask, "Do you still have anyone to sign up for? Register with a certain amount." I also signed up. The amount is also reported. It seems that Rong's success inspired the migrant workers present, and several palms wearing black, half-gray, and half-white gloves suddenly emerged from the crowd. When they finally left, there were only Rong and an old carpenter in his 50s. Carrying a nylon bag, Rong followed Guanhu and bid farewell to the elderly villagers on the construction site. Because Guanhu said that the shooting time will last about 3 months. 80 in a day, settled on the same day, and also managed food and accommodation. This good thing can't be found even with a lantern on. Following Guanhu onto the bus, Rong's mind was still a bit confused as he watched several migrant workers sitting behind the bus dressed similarly to himself. Seeing everyone crowded at the back, he picked a seat in the front and sat down. The old carpenter who came with him took a look and also sat down beside him. After waiting for the car to start and being far away from the construction site for a while, Rong finally became confused and knew how to perform a ridiculous scene. "The reason why I was able to pass just now is purely because I had been bullied a lot before, and only then can I remember that emotion. If I were to play something else, I'm afraid I would have to help out immediately." He felt a little flustered in his heart and instinctively shouted in his heart, "The acting training system." With his thoughts, the light curtain reappeared. Performance training system name. Rong emoji. E, plus, line. E, plus, limbs. E, plus, eyes. D rhythm. E, plus, comprehensive evaluation. E plus experience value. 100 out of 100 honor value. 25 out of 100 trait. None. Hey, what's going on with these flickering plus? Also, how did my experience score become 100? Will my experience score increase as long as I act? But why isn't there a plus sign after this look? On the screen of light, words such as expression, dialogue, body, and rhythm are followed by a flashing plus sign, but the words eyes are empty. After watching for a long time, he couldn't see why. In the end, he could only try to reach out and click on the plus symbol after the top expression. In an instant, he felt as if he had touched the electrified power strip, his body trembling and his whole body tingling, like drinking a bag of ice soda in August or September. Tan. But then the exhilarating feeling quickly dissipated, as if everything that had just happened was an illusion. However, when he looked back at the light curtain, he found that the content on it had changed a lot. Performance training system name. Rong emoji. D line. E limbs. E eyes. D rhythm. E comprehensive evaluation. E plus experience value. 0 out of 100 honor value. 25 out of 100 trait. None. Is it really like that? Rong seemed to have a vague understanding of the rules of this so-called acting training system at this moment. What's wrong with you? The old carpenter sitting on the side asked with a strange expression when he saw his strange behavior. No, it's okay, Rong sneered. The old carpenter has dark skin, but due to its extreme roughness, it doesn't look very bright. His eyes are not big, but there is a bit of light shining through them. The old carpenter, seeing that he didn't want to say more, let out an "oh" sound and casually reached into his coat pocket. He took out a half-deflated cigarette box, but it wasn't all taken out yet. He glanced at Guan Hu and another chubby middle-aged man sitting in front of him, stuffed them back in, and whispered, "Why did you come out so early?" Rong didn't hide it either. He knew that the old carpenter was from the same town as himself and said, "I came out of school. My family is poor and we can't afford to go to college." "Yo, you're still a high school student." The old carpenter looked at him in surprise and asked, "Are you still attending?" Up. The old carpenter instinctively put his hand back into his pocket and touched it. In the end, he took it back and wiped his mouth a few times, saying, "Don't vent your energy. As long as you have a good mind, you can make a name for yourself anywhere." Back then, Han Xian also hit a woman and crawled under her pants, but later he also became an emperor, right? Rong tugged at the corner of his mouth, but he didn't correct the other person's mistake. Sitting on the bus, Rong followed Guan Hu around 3 construction sites, and there were 8 more migrant workers in total. He doesn't know Guan Hu and has never heard of him before, but since his fellow villager, Mr. Liu, has said that he is a great director, he definitely won't be bad. And the filming location is not far from the construction site, only about 10 miles away. After wandering around for a long time, the bus finally stopped outside a construction site. As the bus was about to stop, Guan Hu stood up, supported the back of the chair, and said to the crowd, "My name is Guan Hu. You can call me Lao Guan. I'll make it clear to you first. We work during the day, and at night, feel free to get off the bus. Don't go out and run around if you have nothing to do." Rong followed everyone out of the car, which was completely different from what he had thought on the way. He looked at the construction shed and the weeds-covered wasteland that had not yet been excavated, feeling lost. He seems to have just moved from one construction site to another, with the only change being a nearly 3-fold increase in wages. In a state of confusion, Rong followed the old carpenter to drag his nylon bag out of the luggage compartment of the bus and walked into the work shed. The shed is a bit damp, but there is no strange smell. The bunk beds on both sides are mostly empty. On the two beds near the middle, 7 or 8 men are sitting in a circle naked and wearing shorts, playing poker. Those people saw them come in, glanced at them, and then ignored them. Xiaoshu, you're young, go sleep. The old carpenter found an empty upper and lower bunk and placed his nylon bag on the bed board of the lower bunk, waving his chin towards the upper bunk. Middle. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Production Team. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Production Team. Hey, where did you come from? After putting away his luggage, Rong didn't immediately start work. He changed his dirty clothes and took a bucket of water to take a shower. As soon as he entered the work shed, he was stopped by Guanhu, who was leaning over to watch people play cards. Rong held a bucket in one hand and a basin in the other. Upon hearing this, he couldn't help but be stunned and looked at Guanhu strangely, saying, "You asked me to come." Guanhu frowned and looked at him for a while before suddenly patting his forehead. He remembered that this was the young man found at the construction site this morning. But the face in front of him and the slightly bulging muscles on his body really went against the idea of a migrant worker in his mind. Guanhu hesitated for a moment and showed a hint of apology, saying, "Little brother, you probably won't be able to do it. We're going to shoot a migrant worker, not an idle drama." Although Rong was not very clear about the meaning of idle drama, he understood what was said. He can't do it. But he still hopes to earn money and go back to take the college entrance examination next year. After pestling in place for a while, he placed the basin and bucket on the bedsheet next to him and said, "Boss, please wait a moment." Beside Guanhu, sat a middle-aged Shede in his 50s. Unlike other migrant workers in the shed, he was wearing a pure white vest and a pair of metal-framed glasses. Looking at Rong's back as he ran out, Shede, a middle-aged man, said with half a smile and half a serious tone, "This child has a bit of respect for the dragon." "Hey, I just said what's wrong with you, Teacher Tao." "You're really right about that," Guanhu patted his thigh and then raised his chin towards the door. "But he really doesn't look like a migrant worker." "Old manager." As he was speaking, Rong ran in, his face turning gray again, his wet hair mixed with a lot of gray, his lips slightly dry, and he smiled, revealing white teeth. "You see, is this okay?" He stared at Guanhu without blinking. Probably when he rubbed the dirt on his face, it became urgent. At the corner of his eyes, a piece of wheat-sized skin was flushed with crimson. Guanhu looked at the young man in front of him, his muscles at the corner of his eyes twitching inexplicably, especially towards those hopeful eyes. He felt as if a string in his heart had been touched. The middle-aged man next to him, also known as Lao Tao, paused for a moment and coughed before whispering, "Lao Guan, although he doesn't look like him, he is indeed." Guanhu sighed and stared at him for a while before waving his hand and saying, "Stay." "Thank you." Rong lay in bed, taking a deep breath. This day's life was too bizarre for him. His life in the past 17 years seemed like a stagnant pool. He never left the county where he grew up, and went from preschool, elementary school, middle school to high school in a systematic manner. He also had fantasies, but those fantasies were relatively close to reality. Until today. He never had the luxury of expecting pies to fall from the sky, but now that they have fallen, he wants to grab them tightly. As long as he works for 3 months, he can get 7,200 yuan. Then go back to the original construction site and work until the end of the year, and you can go home to prepare for the college entrance examination. Thinking of this, he quickly got out of bed and startled the old carpenter lying on the lower bunk playing with his phone, saying, "What are you doing?" Rong smiled and untied the nylon bag on one side of the empty bed, saying, "Let me take a book to read." The old carpenter sighed and said, "I've seen so many of these things. How many rural children don't have the money to go to college, not just because they can't go to college? I don't know. Rong shook his head and then casually said, I haven't seen my parents since I was young. People in the village say I was picked up by my master on the market road. The old carpenter became interested and stuffed his phone under his pillow. He flipped over and propped his head with his fist, asking, So how did you get into school? My grandfather provided for him. He used to work in the military, but after changing jobs, he worked as a worker in a coal mine and received a salary. Rong put his book on the bed and said as he climbed, When I was in my 40s, I was beaten in the mine and retired early, so my salary was not high, so I could only afford to go to high school. Your child also has a difficult fate. What's so bitter? Rong leaned down and said with lingering fear, I'll tell you, when I went to school in the county before, it was so cold. I've seen a newborn child thrown on the asphalt road several times, and I guess it's similar. Without my master, I might have died a long time ago. Guanhu and Tao Ziru, who were not far away, silently listened to their conversation. Guanhu took out a cigarette and handed it to the other person, but remained silent. Rong gradually realized that this construction site was very strange because it was not really working. It seemed that he was purely afraid that these migrant workers would panic and find something to do. As for filming, he didn't even see a trace. Only Guanhu and a few people who didn't dress or speak like migrant workers, lived and ate with them all day, and sometimes played cards and boasted together. In addition, a few people gathered around noon to write. He touched the wallet close to him, but didn't think much. Anyway, he got the money. 2 months later, 2 vehicles arrived at the construction site, a white bus and a red truck. Many men and women with shiny clothes and sunglasses got off the bus, and many machines he didn't know were unloaded from the truck. He originally wanted to help with the move, but was stopped by a chubby middle-aged man who said he didn't understand and would damage the machine. The startup ceremony begins. Rong stared blankly at the chicken, duck, fish, meat, and fruit offerings on the incense table, then used his arm to turn the old carpenter and asked, What are you doing? The old carpenter was also startled by the nearby formation of gunfire and incense, but his momentum was not weak at all. You ask me, how do I know? He said, pointing to one of the short young people and saying, Look at that one. It's much more shabby than you, and you can still act. Isn't it possible for you to look like this? Xiao Su, what do you mean? As filming began, Rong finally learned the name of the TV drama they were going to shoot. Survival of Migrant Workers. However, he didn't know any of those actors at all, but he didn't want so much either. He just needed to give money. At the same time, he gradually understood what acting was all about. It was about immersing himself in a completely different identity, expressing himself naturally and fluently, making people look real. He thinks it's interesting, but that's all. He also has to earn money and take the college entrance exam. On set, when he needs to run with him, he follows, and when he doesn't need to, he sits on the side watching. The reason why he sits is because he is too tired. Once he starts shooting, it takes several hours to go back and forth. Although he doesn't need to put in a lot of effort, he always feels even more tired than carrying steel bars on the construction site. Nature. 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 This is the most word Rong hears every day. He used to be able to walk, but once he was filming, many machines would come to him and many people would stare at him. He felt as if he suddenly couldn't leave, and the migrant workers who came with him were similar to him. Once he did this 3 times, Guanhu would start cursing, not targeting anyone, but all at once. What he is most afraid of is hanging the headlights at night, because once that happens, at least it's not uncommon to finish work in the early morning, and 2 or 3 o'clock is a common occurrence. But he didn't slack off at all. Instead he woke up before dawn every day and rushed to the set. He didn't expect Lao Guan to suddenly take a liking to him and give him a chance. He didn't understand anything, and sometimes when following others, he would be asked to start over because he ran too fast and charged too hard. His past growth experiences have taught him a truth. There are no miracles in this world, and if there are, they must have been created by himself. He stood by the sidelines to observe, not for no reason, because he found that watching others act would also increase his experience points. Although it did not increase as much as when he acted himself, he couldn't withstand the long time. Rong held his big water cup and sat by the sidelines, looking at the words, experience value. 99 out of 100 inch on the screen, feeling quite powerless in his heart. This value had not changed for 3 days. It has been almost a month since the start of filming, and the crew said that they can go back to their respective homes in a few days. The headlights were already hanging up, and upon seeing this scene, the old carpenter sitting on the ground patted his thigh, sighed, and exclaimed, "It's not easy to earn any money." Group performance on stage. Rong took a sip of water, set the water cup aside, and followed everyone into the arena. Come on, go on one by one. Haven't you eaten yet? You're going to beg for wages, not just waking up and getting energized. As soon as he made a run, Guanhu's voice came over. As he spoke, he reached out and pointed, saying, "You, come over here." Speaking of words, you should have a more imposing presence. Remember. Rong saw the old manager pointing at him, quickly nodded, ran to the front, and said, "Remember. The scene is quiet. Photography is turned on. Power on. Recording. Power on. Ban air. 15 sessions per mirror. Action." Rong led his men to rush forward and grabbed Mr. Hu, who played Zhang Biao, by the collar. He widened his eyes and shouted, "Here's the money. Card. Can you give me some energy when you guys run? If you don't want to take pictures, just get out of here." Guanhu was probably really angry, and he couldn't help but start using foul language as he spoke. Rong has long been accustomed to this. After shouting, "Card," either he passes or starts cursing his mother. When these migrant workers participate in filming, the latter often happens more frequently. Subconsciously, he called up the system again and found that his experience value had actually reached 100. Without hesitation, he immediately clicked on the plus sign after the line, and as the E rating of the line increased to D, his overall rating unexpectedly jumped from E+ to D. Performance Training System Name. Rong Emoji. D Line. D Limbs. E Eyes. D Rhythm. E Comprehensive Evaluation. D Experience Value. 0 out of 100 Honor Value. 25 out of 100 Trait. None. Do it again. Card. Guanhu watched the replay once, pondered for a moment, stood up, and shouted at Rong, "You stand in front." Turning his head, he said to the deputy director, Lao Kong, "Please go over his lines and let him speak." Rong felt uplifted and determined how the system was being used. Although he didn't feel it was obvious, he knew from the old manager's reaction that the system was most likely designed for acting. Rong was busy until 2:40 in the morning when he finished work. He rested for a while, and when his body regained some strength, he picked up a bucket of water and entered the large toilet behind the work shed. It is both a toilet and a place to take a shower, with no partitions or other obstacles in the middle, providing a very good view. 2 long grooves were built with cement on both sides of the wall, which were raised above the ground. The small ones stood straight in and crouched, while the large ones could crouch on one side or cross over, because the grooves were deep enough and there was no need to worry about the continuously flowing toilet water splashing onto the buttocks. After entering the bathroom, he took off his shorts and threw them into the basin, ready to wait until he finished taking a shower. Looking up, he saw Teacher Ma from the production team next to him. He hesitated for a moment, then picked up the bucket and prepared to walk inside. "Hey, young man, your name is Rong, right?" Ma Xiaohua didn't pay attention to him. After seeing him take off his clothes, he picked up the bucket and wanted to leave. He turned his head and asked with a smile, "Why, are you still afraid of the men looking?" Rong smiled and straightened his hips. On the ground, in the lower half of the shadow, a black shadow swayed slightly. "Yo ho, you're still showing off." Ma Xiaohua glanced at him, gave a dry laugh, and casually threw a handful of water at him, asking, "Are you going back to the construction site after you finish filming?" Rong no longer went inside, soaked the towel in water, wrung it dry, and said, "Yes, I came with a few uncles. If I don't go back, I won't have any place to go." Ma Xiaohua tilted his head and glanced at him, asking, "Do you think filming earns more money than you do on the construction site?" "There must be a lot," Rong grinned. "I'll work on the construction site for 3 days. Let me show you a way: tidy up, get a haircut, buy a decent outfit, and go squatting at the entrance of the Beijing film studio early in the morning. In less than 3 days, I'm sure you can make money, and it must be more than you do on the construction site." Rong looked at him suspiciously and asked, "Is it really fake?" Although he has limited knowledge, he is not foolish. How could he make money so easily? "What am I deceiving you, a child?" Ma Xiaohua couldn't help but raise his tone when he saw that he didn't believe him. "Although you're a bit amateur, your image is good. Let me tell you this. It's unlikely for you to become famous in this life, but it's definitely stronger than your hard work on the construction site. If you earn money, won't you be able to go back home to school?" 3 days later, after Guan Hu announced the end of their role, Rong became conflicted. He felt like he was standing at the crossroads of life, with possible glory on one side but an uncertain future on the other, and an ordinary and predictable life on the other. After hesitating for 5 minutes, he decided to see the fate's arrangement. Taking out a coin from his pocket, he took a deep breath and thought to himself, "I'll go back to the construction site with the words, and I'll go to the capital with the flowers." After thinking about it, he flipped the coin. The coin was spinning rapidly, and the flowers and characters were almost indistinguishable. It quickly rose to a height equal to his line of sight, paused in the air for an instant, and then flipped and fell. Pop. He pressed his right palm against his left hand. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Shede. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Shede. Rong casually put the coin into his pocket. "I didn't see if it was a word or a flower. My grandfather taught him when he was very young that leaving choices to the illusory fate is a foolish and cowardly act. Flipping a coin is just forcing oneself to make a decision in the shortest possible time. Even if the future proves that today's choices are wrong, the choices made by oneself may have regrets, but they will not. Where are we going?" Construction site. Rong felt like a sorghum in a wheat field, with only a scattered self-appreciation. The rest was awkward. Not far away, outside the entrance of Beiying, a group of young performers from the running field were squatting on the ground smoking, chatting aimlessly. He just had his hair cut and bought a new outfit. He was not sure what kind of outfit would fit, so he decided to buy 2 casual suits, one after another, which cost him nearly 700 yuan. He originally wanted to buy a phone, but after looking at the price, he suddenly became unwilling to buy it. "Anyway, I have already said hello to Uncle Lu and the others, so there is no need to worry about my disappearance." In a state of boredom, he opened the system again. Performance Training System Name. Rong Emoji. D Line. D Limbs. E Eyes. D Rhythm. E Comprehensive Evaluation. D Experience Value. 2 out of 100 Honor Value. 25 out of 100 Trait. None. He looked at the unchanged Glory Value and Traits at the bottom and guessed randomly. After thinking for a while, the only thing that can be related to the number 25 in the past 17 years is that he took the top 3 grades 25 times from the middle of elementary school to the 3rd year of high school last semester. He is not sure if there is a connection, and so far, he doesn't know how to use this honor value. As for what traits are, he has no idea at all. Staring at the light screen for a while, he suddenly had a strange idea. Can his system view other people's reviews? With this thought in mind, he immediately turned his gaze to a group performance not far away, thinking to himself. Check that person's comprehensive evaluation. With his thoughts, a pop-up window popped up in the light screen. The comprehensive evaluation of the target's acting skills D. Note. Due to factors such as target status, engagement, and fit, the comprehensive evaluation may fluctuate in different scenes. Surprisingly, wait a minute. So my level is actually similar to group acting. No, I seem to be just a group acting. E+, D, E, E+, E, D. Rong checked most of the group performances and completely gave up. He suddenly realized that his only advantage over those group performances was probably his face. After realizing his own mediocrity, he lowered his expectations significantly before coming and also realized that even if any inconspicuous director had a confused mind and asked him to play a male lead in a play, there was a high probability that he would not be able to bear it. At first, he also thought about whether to follow the group to perform and wait for the opportunity, but in the end, he decided to wait and see. Ma Xiaohua is in his 50s, so he can't deceive himself, can he? On the first day of watching Beiying, the weather was sunny and the temperature was around 30 to 35 degrees Celsius. On the second day of watching Beiying, the weather was sunny with a gentle breeze, and the temperature had increased compared to yesterday. On the third day of watching Beiying, the weather changed from sunny to cloudy, then to light rain, then to moderate rain, then to heavy rain, and finally to sunny again. As soon as the rain started to fall, Rong hid under the nearby newsstand. At this moment, he felt that he might have been fooled by Ma Xiaohua. There were many people coming and going every day, but it had been 3 days and he had not yet encountered any opportunities. Young man, I've been watching you stand for a few days now. Take advantage of this and go back. Don't keep thinking about things that don't show up all day. Find a factory to work for. The old man in the newsstand had his glasses drooping, and his gaze crossed over the wide frame. He looked at Rong and said earnestly, I'm telling you, there have been many young people in these years, and there aren't many who can succeed. Rong's face showed a slight awkwardness and he said, Boss, take 2 bottles of water. At this moment, a slightly chubby middle-aged man wearing a black duckbill cap walked towards the hotel not far away. Rong looked at the familiar face of the other person and his heart lifted a little. He knew that this person was the deputy director of a production team who just arrived yesterday and was still in contact with the group leader this morning. From beginning to end, the other party only glanced at him without any intention of coming up to chat. Rong saw that the other party had paid, then turned around and walked out of the newsstand. He hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth, and chased after him, saying, Please wait a moment. The middle-aged man had slightly dark skin, a round face, and was wearing sunglasses. When he heard the shout, he turned his head and frowned, asking, What's up? Rong ran up to him and asked, May I ask if your crew is recruiting actors? He doesn't even ask about the crew or the show. Currently, he only has 2 options. Either change into a new outfit and sign up as a group performer, or find a construction site to work on. However, he has inquired about the group performance work and it may not happen every day. In a month, he won't be able to earn much money. Yes, the middle-aged man seemed to recognize his purpose, smiled, and asked in response, Do you want to be an actor? Have you ever acted? Yes, it was filmed by director Guan Hu. This time, middle-aged people were surprised. Guan Hu naturally heard of the famous movie, Black Hole, 2 years ago. He looked at Rong and shrugged, saying, But what does it have to do with me? Rong was stunned. Yes, from the other person's perspective, how about oneself and what does it have to do with him? He stood in place until he turned around and walked away in middle age, and then suddenly came to his senses. He pursed his lips and ran after him again, whispering, I'll give you half of the film fee. Empty-handed white wolf. So how much do you say? Middle age finally began to scrutinize him carefully this time. There were not many young people who knew how to sacrifice at a young age. Seeing his good appearance, he extended his thumb and index finger and said, 82, I'll give you 8 or 2, plus 2,000 yuan for the audition fee, but it won't be refunded. How about it? Why not? Su Rong hesitated for a moment. If it were 81 days, he might as well go move the bricks and pay an additional 2,000 yuan for the audition fee. He always felt like the person in front of him was deceiving him like a fool. Young people, you need to have a long-term vision. The middle-aged man saw Su Rong remain silent and patted his arm, saying, it's not a one-time deal. Your image is good, and I will come to you for any future performances. This way, we can have a 37-year audition, but the audition fee cannot be reduced. You should know, even if I have a crush, I can't just open my mouth. Corner. Of course. Su Rong was somewhat moved. He had heard before that the remuneration for a character's performance was different from that of a group performance. Only the short and ugly character surnamed Huang from the production team of Survival Workers was said to earn several thousand yuan per episode. I'll give you 1,000 first. Where are you going to buy groceries here? The middle-aged man waved his hand impatiently and sneered, what's wrong? Are you afraid I'll trick you? You give me the money, and I'll take you to audition immediately. But let's talk about it first. I won't be responsible if it's successful, but when it's successful, don't think you'll have to pay back. That's good. After paying the money, Su Rong realized that he was impulsive, but he couldn't come back and could only follow the middle-aged man closely, fearing that he would run away next time. My name is Chen Dong, just call me Director Chen. Well, Brother Chen. Following behind Chen Dong, the more he thought about it, the more Su Rong regretted it. He felt that he was really foolish enough to be easily deceived by someone, and he cheated 2,000 yuan in one go. Even if he had to move bricks, it would take 2 months to move back. In the elevator, Chen Dong glanced at him with a regretful expression and said, regret? No. Don't talk nonsense, don't worry, brother. I won't trick you, but if you can't try it yourself, then you can't blame me. Chen Dong took off his sunglasses, put them in his pocket, and revealed his triangular eyes. Don't think about suing me in the group, it's useless. Besides, I'll remind you. If you dare to do that, brother will let sure see how deep the water in this circle is. Su Rong didn't have time to think about how deep the water was. As he left the elevator door, he was immediately pulled by Chen Dong to change clothes, put on makeup, and prepare for an audition. Come in. After everything was ready, Chen Dong stood at the door of a room and waved at him. Pushing the door open, there were only 2 people in the room. An elderly woman sat on the middle sofa, and a middle-aged man in his 30s sat diagonally opposite her. The woman just glanced at him and said to Chen Dong beside her, sure, just him. Su Rong was confused. He was still holding onto the door handle and hadn't even stepped in with half of his foot. Closing the door, he basically understood that Chen Dong had played a small role for himself, which was definitely not very likely to have many appearances, otherwise it wouldn't have been so easy. But this idea was immediately rejected by him. He was not a newcomer who didn't understand anything. Such a role didn't require an audition, and Chen Dong, as an assistant director, could make the decision. He estimated that it was highly likely that he was trying out a character between a corner and an unimportant dragon trap, such as having some scenes but not many, and taking a few days to get a boxed meal and leave. He realized that Chen Dong had tricked him, and his unwillingness continued to spread. However, he knew clearly that he couldn't get angry. He didn't know how deep the water was in the circle, but he didn't want to see it in person. The more he thought, the more angry he became, and the more he couldn't help but think. When his pent-up emotions reached their peak, Chen Dong walked over with the contract and patted it in front of him, saying, "This is the contract, sign it." Su Rong also understood that he had no choice at this moment. He took 4 contracts, glanced at them, and his face changed. He asked, "Chen, there are 21 episodes, a total of 26 episodes, really?" What surprised him was not the 2 different remuneration contracts, but the total remuneration. Chen Dongpiang smiled and said, "Why, do you still think I'm cheating on you? Sign now, I'll come back to you next time." What Su Rong didn't know was that Chen Dong gave him the role because he first broke the rules of the industry. This character is already within the scope of Chen Dong's power allocation. According to the rules, it is only natural for him to receive 2,000 yuan, which is tacitly agreed upon by all parties. However, taking kickbacks from actors breaks the rules. The reason why Chen Dong dares to do it is because Su Rong himself proposed this method. Even if it were exposed, he would not be afraid. If it were to change places, there wouldn't be so many people who knew Chen Dong. But for Su Rong, he proposed a share of the film remuneration himself, and he exposed it himself. Not only did he look unattractive, but he also didn't even talk about the basic moral principles. He had no plans to get involved in the circle in the future. Su Rong roughly reviewed the contract, glanced at the name of the play again, and casually signed the name. The Great Qing Dynasty. After he signed the contract, Chen Dong handed him the script and probably understood that what he was doing was not very authentic. He said, "If you don't have anything to do, you can move to the hotel first, and I can arrange a single room for you. In another week, when all the teachers arrive, it won't be easy to handle." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Roll. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Roll. Su Rong moved into a hotel that night. He had originally stayed in a hotel in the capital to save money, and the crowds were neither hygienic nor safe. Leaning at the bedside, I flipped through the script given by Chen Dong, which also confirmed my previous speculation. His role in the play is Fulin, also known as Emperor Xuanji. In theory, as an emperor, the Great Qing Dynasty should have a considerable amount of scenes for him, but in reality, in this romantic drama disguised as a historical drama, Fulin, as the son of the female protagonist Empress Xiaozhuang, does not play a particularly important role. However, as an amateur actor with group acting skills, shouldn't I be fortunate to have such a role? He sat up, took out his pen, and began to carefully ponder the script. He couldn't get a more significant role, attributing it to his own level of expertise. Now, he has glimpsed a corner of this circle and gained some understanding of the dark side, but he still believes that the dark side will never become mainstream. As long as his business level improves, he doesn't have to worry about not being able to get involved or earn money. I spent 2 days flipping through the boring script 5 times. He started practicing in front of the mirror, but no one commented, and he didn't know if he was acting right or wrong. After practicing for half a day, he stopped. Looking at the light curtain in his sight, he fell into contemplation. It turned out that in the production team of Survival of Migrant Workers, his experience points were increasing day by 2 or 3 points. However, after practicing all morning today, he was stunned and had no experience points at all. He has 2 guesses. Firstly, he misunderstood the character, and secondly, he practiced the system without calculating experience points. He himself tends to be more inclined towards the first point. Without professional and systematic theoretical learning, no guidance, no one can imitate. Even if he makes a mistake, he will feel that he is right. If only I had turned it on earlier. Su Rong's expectations came true quickly, and 4 days later, in late August, the production team announced the official start of the production. On the day before starting up, Chen Dong gave Su Rong another lesson. "Hello, are you Su Rong?" Su Rong looked at the short-haired young man with a thin and long face standing in front of the door, pulling a suitcase. He nodded in confusion and said, "I am Su Rong. May I ask who you are?" "I'm Li Guangjie, and I also live in this room," the young man said, waving the room card in his hand. "Oh, please come in, Teacher Li." Su Rong quickly stepped aside and apologized, I didn't get any notice beforehand, that's why. Li Guangjie smiled, but when he saw the gray nylon bag next to the room window, he asked in surprise, what is this? Oh, my luggage. Upon hearing this, Li Guangjie's face couldn't help but become eerie. After a while, she tentatively asked, do you pretend too much like this? No, it's not. Su Rong shook his head and said with a bitter smile, save money. I originally wanted to buy a suitcase, but it felt a bit expensive, so I didn't buy it. Although he lost many things during his growth, his grandfather also taught him a lot. He won't feel inferior or shy about using nylon bags. Since it's for luggage, what should he carry instead of? During their conversation, he checked Li Guangjie's rating and found that C was 2 ratings higher than himself. Li Guangjie himself came from a poor family background and vaguely guessed Su Rong's difficulties. He stopped mentioning this and tidied up his things while asking, I think you haven't graduated yet. Which school is it? Graduated. Su Rong sat in a chair on the side and explained, I haven't gone to college yet. I'm preparing to take the exam next year. By the way, Teacher Li, which school did you graduate from? Don't call me teacher, as long as you're good at shouting, it's okay. Li Guangjie seemed a bit uncomfortable with this title, turned around, smiled, and casually said in a casual tone, it's just a regular school, middle school drama. Su Rong's smile dried up, and he was not completely unaware of it. The two chatted for a while, until they mentioned that they were both from the same hometown, and immediately became closer. When it comes to Su Rong's grandfather who used to work in Ping coal mine, and coincidentally, he was also in the same mine as Li Guangjie's parents, he found many common topics. At dinner, Su Rong arrived early and familiarized himself with the situation, so he took Li Guangjie to the self-service restaurant on the first floor. As he was eating, Su Rong looked into the doorway from a distance and saw a woman who looked quite elegant. She was thin, with an oval face, a wine-red shawl with wavy curls, and wearing a pair of round-framed sunglasses. She couldn't help but point to her chopsticks and ask, brotherly, is that person from our group? Do you know him? Li Guangjie turned her head and carefully looked at her for a while, revealing a sudden expression. She said, that's Teacher Su Qing, playing your mother. Why, you're interested. Su Rong shook his head and denied it. Before he could speak, Li Guangjie added, you're only 17 this year, right? She debuted relatively early, and I estimate that when she was your age, you were still wearing open-crotch pants. Su Rong was almost choked by Li Guangjie's words, but upon careful examination, he felt that although Li Guangjie's metaphor was not appropriate, he couldn't explain why it was not appropriate. Seeing Su Rong's constipated expression, Li Guangjie took a sip of soup and asked with a smile, what's up? Are you still interested? Haha. I still think it's better to be younger, Su Rong sneered and pondered. However, looking at someone who doesn't look that old, I feel like they're only about 2 or 3 years older than me. Li Guangjie grinned and said, in our profession, our face is the most precious. We pay attention to maintenance in our daily lives. Although we look young, we actually spend money on it. Let me tell you this. At her age, she can still maintain her current state, at least this number. Li Guangjie spoke and extended 5 fingers. Su Rong guessed as much as possible and whispered, 500,000. You said 0 less, Li Guangjie glanced at him and said, you didn't know that art school students have been taking care of themselves since their freshman year. They have a lot of water, milk, and cream, and they are all very expensive. Not to mention them, we male actors are the same. Although we don't spend that much, they must have what they deserve, otherwise they won't be able to live with our career. Seeing Su Rong listening in confusion, Li Guangjie didn't explain much and asked, by the way, how did you get into this industry? With your qualifications, it's not easy, right? Su Rong roughly shared his experience. Although he was vague when talking about the upcoming scene, Li Guangjie vaguely guessed something and asked in a low voice, how much money did you give him? Su Rong stretched out 2 fingers and took a breath, saying, 2,000, you really hurt me. If it were on a construction site, I would have to work for 2.5 months without stopping. Li Guangjie held her chopsticks and quietly gave a thumbs up, saying, although you are 6 or 7 years younger than me, your courage is amazing. Su Rong smiled. Chen Dong had already explained to him when he divided the rooms that the matter of dividing the remuneration would not be discussed unless neither of them wanted to work in this industry. Li Guangjie saw that he didn't speak and said, if you're planning to pursue the path of acting, I suggest you take the exams for the 3 major universities. After this drama is filmed, don't take on the role and focus on preparing. It's best to enroll in a training class in Beijing and make up for the basic skills. Su Rong remembered each one in his heart, but he was not sure if he could do it. Li Guangjie said it's light and easy. Registering for classes costs money, and if he stays in the capital, he also needs to rent a house. It's true that the money for filming is fast, but when it comes to it, it's not enough to cover the expenses. In addition, he also has to consider the tuition fee. Even if he adds the remuneration for this film, he estimates it will be even worse. However, he didn't feel too disappointed either. He had already figured it out. As long as he grabbed Chen Dong's rope and took on 2 or 3 more plays, there should be no problem going to school. As for the 30% or 70% of the film pay, since he had gained something, he had to give something. This reason, he had already figured it out. His short-term plan is to apply to an art school next year, but he hasn't figured out a more long-term and detailed plan yet. After realizing the function of the system, he realized that as long as he kept acting, worked for about 10 parts, and through his diligent efforts, he could definitely give a comprehensive evaluation of D+ or above. By then, he thought the situation would improve a lot. After eating and washing up, Li Guangjie advised him to go to bed early. Su Rong was initially puzzled, but when he was called out at 4 o'clock the next day, he finally understood Li Guangjie's intention. Su Rong was dazed as he waited for makeup on the set, only to realize that he seemed to have unintentionally made a big production. Brotherly, that teacher looks familiar, Su Rong said, pointing to the middle-aged person who received the B+ evaluation from the system. That person is about the same size as him, both 1.76 meters tall, with a thin face. When he smiled, his eyes narrowed, and he had seen them on TV a few times before, but because he had never paid attention to them before, he was not clear about their names. Li Guangjie looked at him strangely and asked, "Don't you watch the news?" "That's Teacher Zhang Fengyi, but our group has a bigger shot." "Who is it?" "Teacher Jiang Wen." Li Guangjie saw that Su Rong's face did not show any surprise and said in surprise, "Do you know?" "I don't know." Su Rong looked at him strangely, wondering, is he very famous? Li Guangjie opened her mouth, knowing that she had spoken for nothing. However, when she thought about Su Rong's situation, she realized that Jiang Wen, with such a big wrist, doesn't usually answer TV dramas. After a while, Su Rong finally saw what kind of person the so-called Teacher Jiang Wen was. He had a round face, a beard, slightly black skin, but his voice was not very bright and a bit hoarse. But when he saw the A rating given by the system, he was slightly surprised. This was the highest rating he had seen since he figured out that the system could view someone else's rating. However, his evaluation of the system is not overly superstitious, as every time he gives an evaluation, the system will note that there may be fluctuations due to differences in status, engagement, roles, etc. Moreover, based on his experience as an industry insider, the range of these fluctuations is quite wide. When putting on makeup, Su Rong looked at the shaved bald head in the mirror and felt a little regretful. She had known she had stopped doing her hairstyle a few days ago. After the opening ceremony, the production team officially started filming. At this time, Su Rong had already put on his makeup, moved a small stool, and was waiting to gain experience. After the introduction at the ceremony, Su Rong took a rough idea of the teachers in the group, especially the ones who were introduced first, and kept the key points in mind. The woman who auditioned for him a few days ago, as he had guessed, was the director of the production team, named Zhang Wanting. The name sounds nice, but after half a day at noon, Su Rongling didn't see her smile, so he guessed in his heart that this director might not be easy to get along with. It was similar to what he had anticipated, but at the beginning of filming, the crew encountered problems. The first one is about the match between Jiang Wen and Zhang Fengyi, but it's not that there was a disagreement in their coordination. It's clear that the two have known each other for a long time and have a good personal relationship. When they first met, they even chatted for a while. The problem lies between the big shot Jiang Wen and the director Zhang Wanting. Watching director Zhang Wanting and Jiang Wen remake twice, but after repeated unsuccessful communication, they even began to argue. Su Rong was quite surprised. During the production of The Migrant Workers of Survival, Guan Hu was generally one of them. Now, fortunately, an actor and the director had a disagreement over their role expectations, and they even had a heated argument. Su Rong vaguely heard a little bit of their dispute and asked in a low voice, "Brotherly, can actors still act without following the director's ideas?" Li Guangjie pointed to him, then pointed to herself and said, "We definitely can't do this, but they are wristbands, which is a privilege. Moreover, teacher Jiang Wen himself is also a great director. According to the rumors, he is famous for not being easy to serve." Oh. Su Rong had a scene today. He was supposed to come with experience, but as the morning passed, he didn't rely on experience and just listened to idle chatter for a long time. He could see that although Zhang Wanting is a female director, her desire for control is much stronger than that of Guan Hu. Guan Hu allows actors to break free from the frame and perform independently on set. As long as we communicate with him in advance, sometimes even if we don't communicate in advance, he will praise her for her good performance on the set. But this director Zhang is obviously the opposite. She seems to see the entire filming team as a machine and cannot tolerate any deviation. Even with Jiang Wen's big wrist, Zhang Wanting did not give him any privileges that a wrist should have. Unfortunately, this big shot Jiang has a stubborn temper and insists on reversing Zhang Wanting's thoughts. At first, several heads of the production team advised, but conflicts occurred too frequently. In the afternoon, the production team stopped production directly. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Learning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Learning. Su Rong only served as a spectator from beginning to end. He has a very clear positioning for himself, an amateur actor who, through unremarkable means, obtains roles beyond his abilities. Even if a person's head turns into a dog's head, big shots like Jiang Wen and Zhang Wanting can only hide and watch the excitement from afar. He originally thought that one of the two would eventually compromise, but in the middle of the afternoon, Zhang Wanting directly shook off Jiang Wen and began filming. "Director, is this appropriate?" "I am the director, are you the director?" After the deputy director was scolded, everyone on the set saw the situation clearly and obediently followed suit. Either they learned from Jiang Wen and went to the car to rest. "Su Rong, are you ready?" Chen Dong walked over with a tense expression and asked in a low voice, "Is it okay?" Su Rong nodded and said, "No problem." Chen Dong seemed to be afraid of getting scolded and led Su Rong to wait on the side. When Zhang Fengyi rested, he walked over and accompanied him with a smile, asking, "Teacher Zhang, do you think you have time? Let's queue up first." "He's Su Rong, playing Fulin," he said as he patted Su Rong on the side. Zhang Fengyi glanced at Su Rong, quickly put down his water glass, stood up, and said, "If you have time, let's start now." Su Rong saw Zhang Fengyi, who had a more humble attitude than himself, suddenly understood a truth. The reason why wristbands can become wristbands is not only their own professional level, but also a crucial factor in their interpersonal skills. Otherwise, no one would have paid attention to it before it became a wristband. Zhang Fengyi glanced at Su Rong again, estimated that he was not very old, and asked, "Have you memorized all the words?" "I've memorized it all." Su Rong is not careless in this matter. If he wants to earn money and eat, he either has strong abilities or a good attitude. His business level is average, so he can only make up for it through his attitude. "Teacher Zhang, will you go first? Then let's take a walk first." Zhang Fengyi asked with a nervous expression on his face. "Don't be nervous, is it your first time filming?" Su Rong let out a dry cough and cleared his throat, saying, "No, but I don't have much experience. If anything goes wrong, please bear with me, Teacher Zhang." Zhang Fengyi did not say whether to bear the burden or not, but said, "Let's go and give it a try first. Let's get started." Su Rong thought for a moment and slowly said, "Uncle 14, you misunderstood. This matter must be handled. Both Empress Dowager and Uncle 14 are happy, that's what I think." Zhang Fengyi raised his hand and interrupted him, saying, "Wait a minute, your pace is too fast. Don't worry, take your time." Su Rong opened his mouth and finally just said, "Okay. Uncle 14, you misunderstood. This matter must be handled. Both Empress Dowager and Uncle 14 are happy. It still doesn't work, it's too tight. Relax a bit, I look anxious for you." Zhang Fengyi now saw that Su Rong's foundation was too poor, and the rhythm was chaotic. After seeing Su Rong being interrupted twice, he felt a bit confused. Zhang Fengyi knew he couldn't say a word or two clearly and said, "Look at me, look carefully." He paused for 2 or 3 seconds, his expression softened a bit, and slowly said, "Uncle 14, you misunderstood. This matter must be handled, and both Huang Yin-yang and Uncle 14 are happy. That's what I thought. Can Uncle 14 and Huang Yin-yang live together in the palace and mansion, so that moving from time to time can be fresh and avoid stuffiness?" Su Rong understood what rhythm Zhang Fengyi was talking about this time. He remembers very clearly that during the filming earlier, Zhang Fengyi gave off a slightly domineering impression, but when he said his lines, he deliberately adjusted the pace and tone of the lines, which gave his senses a completely different feeling from before. Under cowardice, one can vaguely see a hint of forbearance. Just like a stranger suddenly rushing towards him. What surprised Su Rong the most was that Zhang Fengyi's face did not show too many expressions, but just listening to him speak, one could roughly feel the positioning of the character. At a distance of only 3 or 4 meters between the two, this impact appeared even stronger. After a while, Su Rong bowed and said, "Thank you, Teacher Zhang. It's okay, let's do it again. Uncle 14, you misunderstood. This matter must be handled with the happiness of both Uncle 14 and Uncle 14. I think this is how Uncle 14 and Uncle 14 can live in the palace and mansion, separated by a period of time. This way, it's fresh to move from time to time and avoid boredom." "Hey, that's right, but you don't have to deliberately imitate me. Everyone's style is different, sometimes you can express yourself according to your own ideas." After the two of them went through it again, filming officially began. "Start Uncle 14, you misunderstood. Card. Over." Upon hearing the director shout, Su Rong breathed a sigh of relief and thanked Zhang Fengyi again. "Thank you, Teacher Zhang. If it weren't for Zhang Fengyi's demonstration just now, he wouldn't have been able to escape the scolding from Zhang Wanting, who still has a gloomy face." At this point, he realized that his previous ideas were too naive. With his current abilities, he could play as a bystander, but it was basically impossible to shape a character. "You're welcome," Zhang Fengyi patted his shoulder and said, "but I don't think you're very suitable for the acting industry." Su Rong's smile stiffened for a moment, and he instinctively asked, "Why did Teacher Zhang say that?" "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I was afraid you would waste time." Zhang Fengyi pondered for a while before explaining, "You lack the most fundamental thing about an actor, spirituality, which is the kind of spirituality that brings the character back to life." Seeing Su Rong's face deteriorating, Zhang Fengyi paused. He didn't mean to undermine him, but he knew very well that Su Rong could never become a good actor in his lifetime, and his upper limit could be seen. Basic skills are fundamental skills that can be compensated for through learning, but Su Rong's performance is too rigid. Even standing opposite him, it is difficult to develop empathy. In the end, Su Rong forced a smile and said, "Thank you, Teacher Zhang, for your guidance." "What's going on? Didn't I go through it all over again? Why is my mood still not good?" Li Guanjie became depressed after seeing Su Rong finish filming the film and joked, "Did I not play with Teacher Su and feel unhappy?" I casually asked, "Are you serious?" Su Rong shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "Just now, Teacher Zhang Fengyi said I don't have spirituality and advised me to switch careers as soon as possible." Li Guanjie pouted and said, "If you don't have spirituality, you can't become an actor." "I'll tell you, some people have said that to me before, but what's wrong with that? I can't make big money, but I can't make small money. I can make money based on my abilities, but it's not embarrassing." "Li Gu, what is spirituality? I can't be specific about this thing. Anyway, it's just that the performance is very serious. Speaking of which, if I understand, can you still sit here and talk to me?" Su Rong's mood was only low for a while. After seeing a slight increase in experience points, he quickly regained his motivation. Without spirituality, there would be none. He believed that with his own efforts, he could definitely stand out. That's not right. Just looking at the sudden increase in experience points, joy was gradually replaced by doubt. Today, with my own performance and watching others, there were only a few games left. Su Rong thought for a while, and a guess came to his mind. He realized that the main reason was still the filming just now. Unlike practicing alone in the hotel before, he was imitating Zhang Fengyi, especially with his own guidance. He seemed to have discovered a new continent, and his heart couldn't help but rejoice. However, whether his guess is correct or not will only be known after experimentation, but once successful, he has a great confidence in quickly increasing his experience points. After the scene ended, Su Rong did not go back with Li Guanjie. Instead, he found a corner and took out the script. Zhang Fengyi carefully pondered which part to play. Although no one was on the side to correct and guide, there were not many opportunities to see a wrist like Zhang Fengyi demonstrate on site. After Zhang Fengyi's guidance, he realized that his talent may be much worse than that of his peers. Although the system is powerful, he still needs to accumulate experience points bit by bit. However, he also found that simply imitating others without guidance did not increase experience points as quickly as imagined. Until the end of work at 1:30 in the morning, Su Rong was greatly encouraged by the 4 experience points added by the system. Continuing at this pace, he estimates that by the time this scene is completed, he will accumulate nearly 200 experience points. By then, he should be able to elevate the overall evaluation of the system to level D. "Hey, Xiaoxiu, why didn't you go back?" Zhang Fengyi got on the bus and looked at Su Rong sitting on it, asking strangely. Su Rong jokingly said, "I was hit by Teacher Zhang today, and I'm not convinced. I just want to learn how you act." Zhang Fengyi was first surprised, then burst into laughter and said, "You kid, this energy is amazing. Teacher Zhang, do you know each other?" The person who followed on board was a middle-aged man with a Chinese character face who was about the same age as Zhang Fengyi. However, he was not sure what the two were talking about. Seeing Zhang Fengyi pointing at Su Rong and laughing, he curiously asked. Su Rong saw that it was Sun Juan from the same group and quickly stood up, saying, "Teacher Sunday." Sun Juan had a national face, big eyes, and wore a black duckbill cap. The male actors on the entire cast, except for him who was bald, were clearly prepared. Zhang Fengyi collapsed into his seat and introduced himself, "Xiao Su, Su Rong," he played Fulin. "You haven't met him yet, have you? Teacher Sun called me Xiao Su is successful. Sun Juan saw Su Rong standing all the time and smiled, saying, "Hello, you don't need to be so polite. As the car started, Zhang Fengyi suddenly turned his head and looked at Su Rong sitting across the aisle, asking, "By the way, you said you watched me play. Did you think of anything? I feel that rhythm is more important than expression." Su Rong thought for a moment before tentatively saying, "That's the truth, you act and see." "Yes, take a look." Sun Zhuan, who had been tired all day, was just having fun and cheering on the side. Su Rong turned his head to look at the half-collapsed person on the bus and asked, "Now? What's wrong with that? Acting is just for people to watch. Why, do you still want to keep yourself in the house and watch it yourself? That's called building a car behind closed doors and you won't grow." After thinking for a moment, Su Rong realized that Zhang Fengyi's words were reasonable and said, "Then I'll imitate your passage." As he spoke, he performed a play between Zhang Fengyi and Su Qing today, but because no one had set him up, he only played half of it. After he finished his performance, Zhang Fengyi sat up slightly and said, "It's a bit better than in the afternoon, but it's still a bit urgent. Look, you can't just follow the line, he doesn't need my guidance anymore. You need to grasp the key point, just highlight the guidance from the whole sentence, and what he really needs. It's best to use a small amount of time to bring it over and highlight that it's you in the second half of the sentence. You're shaping the character, and you can't just talk about it flat, let alone hastily express your lines." "I understand, thank you, Teacher Zhang. Thank you for your performance. When we set up the show, I can also save a lot of trouble." Haha. Seeing Zhang Fengyi's tired expression on his face, Su Rong hurriedly said, "Teacher Zhang, please rest first." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Growth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Growth. Su Rong, wake up. What are you doing, brotherly? Hurry up, we're about to leave. Su Rong looked at Li Guangjie wearing clothes in a daze, then turned his head to look out the window. The night was still deep. He felt like he had just fallen asleep and hadn't had a chance yet. What time is it? 4 o'clock. Su Rong rubbed his drowsy eyes, and after a moment of inspiration, he quickly got up. Although still very tired, I have to rush to the set. After forcefully washing his face and going downstairs, Su Rong rubbed his slightly dizzy head and looked at Li Guangjie beside him, asking, "Brotherly, are actors like this?" Basically, the production team usually tries to arrange each actor's play together as much as possible, which can save a lot of costs. For example, if you have a 3-month shooting schedule, you only need to stay in the group for about a month. Getting on the car, Su Rong tilted his seat and said, "I feel like if I had to endure like this every day, not to mention a month, I wouldn't be able to handle a week. I told you to come back early yesterday, but you didn't listen. Now you know it's uncomfortable, and it's just the beginning." Li Guangjie lowered her head and played with her phone. Seeing Su Rong yawning drowsily, she said, "When the temperature rises later, you won't be able to handle it anymore." "Good morning, Teacher Zhang." "Morning." Su Rong saw Zhang Fengyi walking up, greeted him, took over the conversation, and said, "That looks like Teacher Zhang, isn't it more tiring? His acting is much more than mine." Li Guangjie rubbed her thumb, index finger, and middle finger. Seeing Su Rong's clear expression, she smiled and said, "People also have moments to rest, not like you. You just squat for a day on set, squint for a while, otherwise you won't be energetic during the day." Only when we arrived at the studio and finished making up, the crew fell into the same situation again yesterday morning. Start. Card. Let's start over. Start. Card. Let's start over. The dispute between Jiang Wen and Zhang Wanting became even more intense, and due to the scenery, it was impossible to proceed further. At the end of the day, Su Rong almost got through the argument between Jiang Wen and Zhang Wanting. At night, Chen Dong notified each room that he would take a day off tomorrow. Su Rong understands that if the problem is not solved, not to mention taking a day off, even taking a month off cannot continue filming. However, the contradiction was resolved unexpectedly quickly. On the third day of the official launch of Qing Dynasty Storm, when Su Rong returned to the set, he did not see the figure of Zhang Wanting. Quickly, he knew the reason. The director has changed. The new director's name is Chen Jialan, a middle-aged Chinese character with half-white hair. He has a smile on his face and looks quite friendly. Seeing this, Su Rong had a bold idea in his heart. He turned Li Guangjie next to him with his elbow and asked, "Do you think if I deliberately offend teacher Jiang Wen, would I also be replaced? And then pay a large penalty for breach of contract?" Li Guangjie glanced at him and said, "If you're planning to make a profit and not get involved in this industry in the future, it's definitely no problem. Okay, let me just say it. Chen Jialan's directing style is completely different from that of Zhang Wanting. He is quite tolerant of the actor's independent performance, and probably also saw Zhang Wanting's lesson from the past. Jian Wen always follows his own ideas in how he wants to act." As he gradually got to know each other, Su Rong realized that Jian Wen was not a difficult person to get along with. As long as it wasn't related to his understanding of the character, he wouldn't ask too much, and he never interfered with Chen Jialan's requirements for other actors. But Su Rong suffered a lot, especially after the crew moved to the film and television base in Jiangsu province, and his scenes began to concentrate. Although he has been working hard to improve himself, he feels that he is always close to Chen Jialan's requirements. He also saw that Chen Jialan was filming with the requirements of a professional actor, who could have ideas and creativity, but the most basic requirements must be met. These requirements are easy for students like Li Guangjie who graduated from professional colleges to complete, but for him, a monk who has just become a monk, the difficulty is not insignificant. On the 5th day of moving to the new base, Su Rong squatted on the ground without any image, holding a wooden stick and pulling it blindly on the ground. "Cheer up, isn't it just a few more times? How can you fight like a defeated rooster?" Zhang Fengyi patted his shoulder and comforted him. Su Rong looked up and could only respond with a bitter smile. It would have been better if Su Qing had rehearsed with him. But teacher Su said that he doesn't have the habit of rehearsing, which is understandable. Many actors don't have this habit, thinking that it will limit their performance on the spot. But Su Rong can't do it. His upper limit is too low, no matter how clever he is, it's difficult to stand out. He also suggested scheduling first, but teacher Su didn't cooperate and even ignored him. He squatted and thought for a while before vaguely understanding the reason. The cause of the incident was still that he had been too tired during this time. He arrived at the set in a daze in the morning and greeted Su Qing, shouting, "Teacher Su. It has been about 10 days since the start of filming, and we often meet each other. Moreover, the two of them will have many opposing scenes in the future." Su Qing then said, "You don't need to call the teacher, it's too polite." Su Rong had heard Li Guangjie mention before that Su Qing was more than 10 years older than him, and then he casually said, "Aunt Su is good." He still remembers the situation at that time. Su Qing was stunned for a while before revealing a seemingly less brilliant smile. But at that time, he didn't realize what was wrong. It wasn't until Su Qing refused to rehearse just now that he realized he had said the wrong thing, but he couldn't understand it. "It was just a name, isn't it?" Zhang Fengyi understood the reason and laughed heartily before turning his head to become a mediator. He advised, "Teacher Su, why don't we rehearse first? Look at how tired the child is." Perhaps Su Rong has been running diligently these days delivering tea and water, but Zhang Fengyi occasionally guides him. "Teacher Zhang, you know that." Su Qing sat on the chair, her eyes curved into crescent moon, glanced at Su Rong with a bitter smile on his face, tilted her head, and said, "I really don't have the habit of rehearsing." "Why are you so insightful, kid? Apologize to teacher Su quickly." Su Rong also knew that this was not a solution. He got up and walked over, apologizing, "Teacher Su, I'm sorry, I really didn't mean to." What are you apologizing for? I really don't have the habit of rehearsing and didn't intentionally target you. You haven't seen me these days, have you? Su Qing still sat on the lounge chair, slightly tilting her chin and said, and what you mean is, you didn't mean it, you just thought I was old. That's why you called me Teacher Su. No, no, no. Su Rong quickly waved his hand to defend himself. The first time he felt that women were so troublesome, he completely unreasonable. I really don't think so. You're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen since I was so old. Su Qing heard Su Rong's cold words popping out of her mouth, and the dimples on her face suddenly flashed. But immediately, she lowered her head and stopped it. After blinking a few times, she raised her chin again, and her voice became much gentler. She asked, really? Why don't you look at me when you're talking? Look at me and say it again, and don't call me a teacher anymore. Su Rong's gaze remained fixed on his toes, without noticing the subtle changes in Su Qing's expression. However, Zhang Fengyi and Jian Wan, who noticed this scene, suppressed their laughter and squeezed their waist to watch the play. The surroundings suddenly quieted down, as if just now they were paying attention to this side. Su Rong shifted his gaze to Su Qing's face, instinctively wanting to dodge, but the next moment he forcefully pulled back and focused his attention on her eyebrows. Her skin color is very white, and her eyes are watery. But unfortunately it's a woman, trouble. After hesitating for a few seconds, he said seriously, Sister Su, you are the most beautiful girl I have ever seen since I was so old. Puff. Jiang Wan, who was drinking water, sprayed out all of it in one gulp, covering his stomach and stomping on the ground with a smile. After a while, he gasped for breath and said, Xiao Su, are you memorizing lines? Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Listening to the loud laughter around him, Su Rong awkwardly poked his toes at the soles of his shoes, which was too embarrassing. It was embarrassing. All right, everyone, stop laughing. Chen Jialin saw Su Qing also leaning his head and covering his mouth with a straight smile, and said with the same smile, Teacher Su, have you forgiven Xiao Su this time? Su Qing smiled and said, look at what you're saying, it seems like I'm such a small-bellied person. She stood up and turned her head to Su Rong, who was feeling embarrassed. She whispered, no matter how old a woman you are in the future, you can't call her auntie. Otherwise, someone might turn against you on the spot. Remember. Su Rong thought to himself, will it be possible for me not to deal with women in the future? But in his mouth, he still lowered his eyebrows and said, thank you, Sister Su. At the same time, I secretly remind myself that in the future, I would rather speak less than say the wrong thing, especially when dealing with women. The crew started filming again, and because of the previous incident, everyone on the crew had a deep impression of Su Rong, no longer just an ordinary actor. The benefits are also obvious. Xiao Su, look at Teacher Su. Chen Jialin shouted to stop, with a hint of humor in his voice. Are you too shy? How do I feel like you're a bit afraid of me? No. Then why don't you dare to look at me, Why aren't you talking? Su Rong is a bit overwhelmed. Saying too much is wrong, and not speaking is not enough. Can you explain something to him? Zhang Fengyi grinned and said, Teacher Su, please don't tease Xiao Su. What did you say? She's the most beautiful girl I've ever seen, and it's normal to be nervous. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. At the end of September, Su Rong's role was officially completed. Under the guidance of the appearances of two big shots, Jiang Wan and Zhang Fengyi, his business level has improved significantly, and his number of NG sessions has decreased significantly compared to when he first started. The most intuitive thing is that the comprehensive evaluation of the system has been raised to level D. Performance Training System Name. Su Rong Emoji. D Line. D Limbs. D Eyes. D Rhythm. D Comprehensive Evaluation. D Experience Value. 53 out of 100 honor value. 25 out of 100 trait. None. There was a slight discrepancy with his initial expectations, as during the filming of Qing Dynasty Storm, he only received 151 experience points. Although he understood that rhythm is more important than physical expression, he still focused on physical expression as an opportunity for improvement. Because compared to the beginning, he feels that his rhythm control during his performance has greatly improved. I don't know if imitation really had an effect, or if the other 4 items were all raised to level D. On the day after he upgraded his physical expression, the rhythm rating naturally rose to level D. After achieving a comprehensive evaluation of D, Rong realized something not very good, as he gained less experience points every day. But after thinking about it, I also understood that as he improved himself, many things he could express, the effect of imitation weakened a lot, and the decrease in experience points was reasonable. I gave Qindong a reward of 52,000 yuan for the successful film, which was agreed upon beforehand. Considering that I didn't have much fame yet, I had to rely on Qindong to take on the role in the future, so I gave an extra 400 yuan. What he didn't expect was that the thread he left had not been used yet, and instead, an unexpected person gave him a chance. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Signing of Contract. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Signing of Contract. The cause of the incident was still shooting idle chatter. Su Qing. Don't you have to attend classes? Rong said, no need, I'm taking a leave of absence. I'm planning to save up enough tuition and go back to prepare for the exam. Su Qing. Taking a leave of absence from school. Rong. Come out to earn tuition fees. Su Qing. Have you earned enough? Rong said, I guess it's almost there. Li Gu said that if I'm planning to take the art school entrance exam, I need to enroll in a training class. I think I can take on 2 more shows. Su Qing. Do you know many directors and producers? Rong. No, I don't know anyone. It's just a matter of luck. Su Qing. May I introduce you to a brokerage company? Although Rong has been out on the road for less than a year, he feels that the growth in the past 6 months is even more profound than the past 17 years. Su Qing's words were not taken seriously. He and Su Qing only had a slight intersection by chance, just like Zhang Fengyi, they met by chance, but fundamentally they were people from 2 different worlds. Su Qing said so casually, and he just listened so casually. He rushed over and didn't take it seriously. But when Su Qing gave him a phone number, he suddenly felt that although Aunt Su was not young, her heart was indeed quite kind and heartwarming. Thank you, Sister Su. Rong sincerely thanked him. She was the first person in nearly a year to give him practical help. Su Qing smiled, her eyes slightly narrowed to crescent-shaped, revealing 2 shallow dimples. She said, no need, just when a friend asked, I recommended you. Rong nodded, but also vaguely understood a truth. He flattered Zhang Fengyi, which was quite utilitarian. His goal was to ask him to guide him in acting. He had also tried to contact Jiang Wen, but his hot face pressed against his cold buttocks. Holding the note, he suddenly realized that handling things can be utilitarian, but being a person cannot be utilitarian. For Zhang Fengyi, he had some requests, but all he received was just a few words of guidance. For Su Qing, he had nothing to ask for, but he received unexpected help. He doesn't know the weight of this helping hand, but for him at least at this moment, it is a hope. Just like last time on the crew of Survival of Migrant Workers, they did not bid farewell and left silently. Having packed his luggage, Rong boarded the train heading north early in the morning. When he arrived in the capital, he first found a place to live and then spent a huge amount of money to add a large item to himself, a small smartphone. I played with my phone for a while, both curious and encouraging. When there is no expectation, there is nothing to worry about, but once there is expectation, one begins to worry about gains and losses. It was almost 10 minutes before he finally dialed the phone. A sticky voice came over the phone. "Hello, this is Run Brokerage. May I know who you are?" According to Aunt Sue's instructions, Su Rong introduced himself and said, "Hello, I am Su Rong, recommended by General Manager Zhao." "Okay, please wait a moment." The phone fell into a brief silence, and after a moment, Noah's voice said again, "Hello, are you there? Please come over tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. The address is." Su Rong responded and hung up the phone with a click, followed by a busy beep. After hanging up the phone, he immediately searched online for news about Run. The more he looked at it, the more he felt uneasy, especially the various largest names in China, which made him feel even more stressed about his trip tomorrow. Aunt Sue's casual mention is a bit impressive. But when he arrived at Heron's doorstep the next day, he was calm again. The crew of the Great Qing dynasty were not all the same, but what had to do with him? No matter how big Heron's signboard is, it's not its own, is it? Su Rong was stopped by two sturdy security guards before entering the door, wearing a black duckbill hat and his hair hadn't grown yet. "I'm looking for Guosi. I made an appointment yesterday. Wait here." In Su Rong's imagination, the person with such a sticky voice must be an extremely cute girl, but when he saw a round, short-haired girl wearing black-framed glasses coming out of the elevator and waving at him, he was stunned. Su Rong, Guosi ran a few steps to the front and took a few breaths before sweetly saying, "Are you Su Rong? Let's go up with me." Su Rong listened to the same sticky voice and looked at his body, which was nearly twice as wide as himself, walking ahead. He forcefully suppressed the surprised expression that should not have appeared in this occasion. In the elevator, Guosi, who was not tall, looked up at him slightly and said, "I will take you to meet Mr. Chang Jihong first. She is a well-known agent and also the general manager of the company. By the way, what is your relationship with Mr. Zhao?" "Mr. Zhao?" Su Rong stared blankly at Guosi. Guosi smiled and didn't continue the topic. Instead, he said, "Let me introduce our company to you." On the 6th floor, Guosi led him to the innermost frosted glass office and tapped twice. "Come in." The sound coming from the room was very gentle, and it sounded quite young. Su Rong estimated that he was over 40 years old. Chang Jihong is not tall, has short hair, is chubby, has small eyes, wears a pair of black-framed glasses, and looks quite friendly. "Hello Mr. Chang. Sit down." Chang Jihong extended her finger to the black office chair across the desk, looked at his empty hands, and asked, "Did you bring your resume?" Su Rong was stunned for a moment, then silently pursed his lips and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know I needed a resume." Chang Jihong looked at him for a few seconds and then asked, "Do you have any special skills, such as singing, dancing, or other talents?" Su Rong shook his head silently. Chang Jihong was stunned for a moment, obviously not expecting such a stunned young person from the group. She still smiled gently and said, "My next words may hurt you a bit, but it's also for your own good. First of all, you're not suitable to be an actor. You don't have light in your eyes. I wonder if you've ever observed those group performances on set. Your eyes are similar to them, like a wooden stake. Listen to me finish speaking." Seeing Su Rong wanting to refute, Chang Jihong reached out and stopped him. "Actually, this is not the most crucial thing. The most important thing is that your emotional intelligence is very low. For example, now you should at least wait for me to finish speaking. For example, when I asked you if you have any other talents just now, you can answer, 'I can learn,' instead of shaking your head." Chang Jihong's tone was unpleasant, with a warm smile on her face, like an elder. "Choosing to become an artist is just a waste of time for you. With that energy, it's better to do what you're good at." This was not the first time Su Rong had heard such words, and he was mentally prepared. Without hesitation, he shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chang. I still want to be an actor." Chang Ji's blushing smile suddenly rippled and he asked, "Why, do you love acting?" No, Su Rong vaguely understood the complex meaning in the other person's smile and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Come and pay quickly." The smile on Chang Jihong's face froze and quickly faded with warmth, saying, "It's the first time I've seen someone as sincere as you. At least I didn't use that kind of performance-loving rhetoric." Without letting Su Rong speak again, she ended the interview and said, "Let's do this for now." When Su Rong left the office, Guosi knocked on the door and walked in, asking, "Leader, how does he arrange it?" Chang Jihong picked up the document at hand, signed the instructions, and said, "Another person with a heart higher than the sky and a destiny thinner than paper, just blinded that face in vain." Guosiming understood Chang Jihong's meaning and whispered, "Leader, why don't we sign him? Otherwise, it will be difficult for Mr. Zhao to respond." The pen tip circulating on the paper paused for a moment and said, "It's not easy to answer. Why don't I talk to him later and transfer you to the group?" Guosi's gaze shrank behind her black-framed glasses, her voice lowered even lower, but she still stood still and asked, "So I'll let him go back?" Chang Jihong finished reviewing a set of materials and glanced up at her, saying, "Whoever comes will take care of it. Zhao said he's preparing for a new play. You need to handle the procedures for him, and by the way, you must arrange a character with enough scenes. Let Zhao take a good look at what kind of people he's stuffing in." Guosi's mouth opened, and she was amazed by Chang Jihong's Tai Chi skills. She had no doubt about Chang's vision as a gold medal agent. Since she asserted that Su Rong couldn't become an actor, he probably couldn't eat this bowl of rice. If Mr. Zhao doesn't even need the people arranged by him at that time, why should they use them? At noon, Su Rong walked out of the building carrying a script and a contract. He could see that the reason why Chang Jihong signed him was largely due to Aunt Su's affection. "Perhaps I feel like I don't have much future ahead of me, with a contract term of only 3 years, which is incomparable to the current long contracts of 7 or 10 years. In Guosi's spare time with the contract stamped, he had already read the outline of the script. In the current trend where any type of emotional drama accounts for a considerable proportion, this is a drama that is destined to be impossible to become popular, and he has taken one of the less important roles, which looks like a bit of a playboy. But he didn't care too much either. After filming this drama, he at least didn't have to worry about money in the short term. He has about 11 episodes, 3,001 episodes, and a total remuneration of 30,300 for more than 5 scenes. The brokerage company drew 60%, but because this drama was invested by High-Run Film and Television, it was equivalent to a left-handed over right-handed approach. The remaining 40% of the agents need to draw another 10%, and then pay taxes. They will receive around 10,000 yuan. That's enough. Before getting on the bus, he glanced at the name of the script. Bright Sword. The production team plans to start in mid to late December, and there are still 3 months left, but Su Rong has no plans to go home. Guo Sixian had already made it clear to him earlier that the company usually tests 3 to 5 roles. If there is any improvement, resources will be increased in the future. If there is no improvement, the contract is almost non-existent. In the short term, he doesn't have to worry about finances, but registering for classes must be put on the agenda. It is already September now, and in half a year, I will take the art exam. About 3 months after the art exam, it is the Unified College Entrance Examination. He is not too worried about the national exam, but he is quite uncertain about the art exam. Considering that he would be staying in the capital for a while, he wandered around for a while before renting a house near Beidian. After packing up properly, I took a look around Zhongxi and Beidian to see the prices of the training courses. Considering that the training fee was a bit expensive, he first bought 30 sets of cultural course papers and locked himself in a rented room for a week. He was planning to try Li Guangjia's method, but he didn't know if it was feasible, but there was nothing wrong with trying. After completing the exam paper, he spent 50 yuan to obtain a certificate. After several rounds of investigation, he finally arrived at a medium-sized training institution. Star Art. He glanced at the recruitment poster standing by the door, thought about Jiang Wen's performance state, and pushed the door in. Inside the door, there was a goose-egg-faced girl wearing professional attire sitting at the front desk. When she saw him enter, her eyes lifted and a smile appeared on her face. She asked, "Hello, do you want to enroll?" Rong shook his head and said, "No, I'm here to apply for the position of teacher." The girl's already small smile immediately faded, and when she saw that he was not very old, she asked, "So what is your education level?" Rong didn't answer immediately, but confidently took out his student ID from his pocket and patted it in front of the girl, saying, "It's just an ordinary school, Peking University, but I haven't graduated yet." "Can't it?" Rong frowned and asked, seeing the girl being silent for a long time. The girl picked up the certificate and carefully looked at it, saying, "Wait a moment, I'll invite our supervisor to come." In no time, Egg Face followed a woman in her 20s with big eyes and walked out, probably the supervisor she had previously mentioned. "Hello, my name is Jin Fangfang." After shaking hands with Rong, Jin Fangfang asked with uncertainty, "Are you applying for a teacher position?" Jin Fangfang is not tall, while Rong estimates it to be around 1.55 to 56 meters, definitely less than 1.6 meters. Her skin is very white, her face is round, and her eyes are particularly large, which makes her other facial features very small. Yes, in terms of cultural courses. Seeing the other person's big eyes filled with doubts, Rong smiled confidently and calmly said, "You can take out a set of test papers to try. It doesn't matter what subject you study in science." Seeing his confident appearance, Jin Fangfang was half convinced and turned her big eyes to the oval-faced girl, saying, "Bring me a math paper." "Okay." Rong listened and breathed a sigh of relief. As long as it wasn't in English, he wasn't at all empty-hearted. About an hour and a half later, Rong finished the paper and pushed it directly to Jin Fangfang, saying, "Let's take a look." His every move is imitating Jiang Wen, with an extremely imposing demeanor. Jin Fangfang carefully checked and looked at the score, but was not too surprised. It's strange if students at Peking University can't score above 140 points, Rong's score is not high, only 143 points. She didn't think about it for too long, so she handed Rong a stack of documents and said, "This is the basic information form, please fill it out. I will be my colleague in the future." Jin Fangfang's attitude changed very quickly. While Rong was filling out the information, she sat on the side and looked at Rong's face. Although he was bald, he looked quite handsome upon closer inspection, so she asked, "You look pretty good. Why didn't you take the Beijing Film and Television University or the Central Academy of Drama?" Rong didn't look up and wrote while saying, "The college entrance examination was too high. The admissions office at Peking University blocked my family's door, and my family charged me money. I can't refuse to report." Jin Fangfang's expression was slightly subdued, but knowing that what the other party was saying might be true, she couldn't refute it. After a pause and a moment of relaxation, Jin Fangfang said again, "There are two types of cultural classes here. One is the head teacher, and the other is private tutoring. If you're still in school, why don't you do private tutoring? How much is it?" 100 per day. The specific class time needs to be negotiated between you and the other party, but they are usually students on campus and their schedule is similar to yours. For the first time, Rong clearly realized that knowledge is wealth, and at the same time, he also realized that vision determines height. In the village, he never thought of becoming a tutor, nor did he think that knowledge could be exchanged for money. The environment he lived in only made him believe that only strength and a degree could exchange for a reward. Line. Rong nodded, not too concerned about these things. He didn't really come to be a teacher, the job application was just a cover-up, his real goal was to participate in free training. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Students. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 8 Students. The fact has proven that Li Guangjie's ideas are really useful. Su Rong sat among a group of students, and some teachers simply didn't notice him and thought he was new. Some discovered it, but after Su Rongliang issued his work permit and stated that he was studying and obtaining experience, although the teacher felt strange, he did not ask much. This proves my strong teaching ability. By contrast, teaching students is much more complicated. Is that Aunt Wang? Hello, I'm Su Rong, the tutor of Xingyi. Here is my work permit. Su Rong stood outside the anti-theft door and said to a pair of mother and daughter-looking people behind the door. Both the mother and daughter were not very tall in stature. The mother looked at them in her 40s, with a small round face, double eyelids, and several wrinkles visible between the corners of her eyes and eyebrows. The girl looked as if she was different in age from him, with an oval face, high forehead, eyebrows and eyes very similar to her mother, but probably because she was too thin, her cheekbones were relatively more prominent. Perhaps seeing him not very old and still bald, both mother and daughter looked at him with suspicion on their faces. Su Rong had no choice but to ask for his student ID again and said with a smile, I am a student at Peking University and I am currently working as a part-time tutor. Upon seeing the evidence, Aunt Wang no longer doubted and quickly opened the anti-theft door. She smiled apologetically and said, Oh, it turns out to be Teacher Su from Peking University. Teacher Su, come in quickly, come in quickly. As soon as the other party spoke, Su Rong immediately recognized from his accent that the mother and daughter had a certain northeastern accent. Although they spoke Mandarin, their characteristics were too unusual. The girl remained silent, her almond eyes fixed on him, filled with curiosity. Su Rong walked into the door with his backpack on his back, feeling a bit uneasy under the girl's gaze. He smiled and asked, Is this Zhang Rui? Rui, quickly call out to Teacher Su. Aunt Wang said to the girl and asked Su Rong to sit on the sofa. She poured a glass of water and smiled, saying, Teacher Su, drink a glass of water. It's such a hot day, thank you for your hard work. Teacher Su, the girl said casually and then fell silent. Thank you, Aunt Wang. Su Rong stood up and took the water glass, saying thank you. Seeing the girl still staring at him, he couldn't help but ask, which school is Zhang Rui planning to apply to? Aunt Wang glanced at her daughter and said with a bitter smile, she wants to take the Beijing Film and Television University or the Central Academy of Drama, but she has been out of school for several years and I don't know if she can get accepted. Su Rong looked at the female student in confusion and asked, How many years have I been in school? Yeah, I'm currently in the cultural troupe. When Su Rong truly began tutoring, he realized the pain of the teacher. Although Su Rong was not taught for the family, he dared not delay the child's future. After thinking for a while, he came up with a few questions, intending to first understand Zhang Rui's learning level before making a detailed study plan. Zhang Rui was not hesitant. After finishing brushing for a while, she looked at him with her head held high and her chest held high. Su Rong could see that this student was a foolish and bold person who didn't hesitate when solving problems, like a divine aid. Moreover, strangely enough, after confusing the theorem, she could still continue to deduce. However, the problem-solving approach is generally correct, and my previous studies may not have been completely neglected. Su Rong shook the draft paper in his hand and said mercilessly, It's all wrong. Impossible. These few questions are so simple, how could I have done them wrong? Zhang Rui widened her eyes and said firmly and loudly. Su Rong looked at her in surprise and asked, Why are you so confident? You're not much older than me, are you? Zhang Rui didn't answer him, but instead asked in reverse. I'm 17, and after the Chinese New Year's 18. Ah, you're even younger than me. But I am your teacher. But even if it is, why do you say I made a mistake? Pop. Do you think this student ID looks fake? Okay. Here, let me tell you why these questions are wrong. Rong feels that his current life is quite comfortable. He attends classes every day and has a salary to earn. When he has free time, he will flip through the script. Of course, it would be even better if students could be less stubborn. Unlike in the Qing dynasty drama crew where he only studied his own lines, this time he pondered very carefully pondering and refining each character so that he could compare them later. Guozi said he would try out 3 to 5 characters for him, and he estimated that there would be only 3. If there was no improvement, he might have wasted the favor of Aunt Sue. He knows that this war film won't even make a splash, but he believes there will be a chance in the future. Can't he just play such a bad movie every time? After spending 3 leisurely months, Rong greeted Jean Fongfong and Aunt Wang and their daughter, telling them that he was preparing for the final exam. He packed his luggage and rushed to Jinzhong to meet the production team. He doesn't have many scenes, according to the crew's plan. He can finish filming in about a month. Before he arrived, the crew had already started filming for a week. Before getting off the car, Rong realized his carelessness. He knew the crew was filming in the Taihang Mountains, and the temperature would be lower, but he didn't expect it to be so much lower. Even wearing a down jacket, he was still shivering with cold. The next day, I joined the group and took a look. It was similar to what he had anticipated before, with a small production team and a small lineup. There was no actor in the crew who could be called a wrist actor. Rong didn't have many ideas either, and planned to be a transparent person as usual, finishing the film with peace of mind, and then withdrawing. It's best to add 200 to 300 experience points and improve your acting evaluation to C, so it should be much easier to interview with other groups in the future. His appearance was just too prominent on set. After all, he was the only actor without hair. Just after putting on his makeup, a middle-aged man with a big nose, small eyes, and small mouth, and a gray painted face, wearing a tattered military uniform, spotted him and asked, "Hey, that bald guy, are you my guard?" Rong was stunned for a moment and quickly realized that the middle-aged man should be Li Yubin, the male lead in this play. He gave a non-standard salute with a swoop and loudly said, "Report to the leader, the monk is reporting to you." Li Yubin was intimidated by his prank, and then he laughed and patted his shoulder, saying, "You're quite sturdy. What's your name?" Rong hurriedly said, "Teacher Li, my name is Rong. If you call me Xiao Su, you will succeed. I'll call you monk, it's easy to say." After seeing Rong's lips turn purple from the cold, Li Yubin quickly asked the crew for a cotton coat and pulled him to introduce them one by one. Rong didn't use the system to check everyone's reviews this time. In the past 3 months, he has reflected on his behavior on the crew of the Great Qing Dynasty. Because he checked the reviews of all the actors on the set early in the morning, he would approach Zhang Fengyi and Jiang Wen whenever he had something to do. Except for his fellow villager Li Guangjie, he hardly made any friends. At first, he didn't realize anything, but later he signed with Hai-Run through Aunt Sue and realized the importance of networking. Only then did he realize how foolish his behavior was. He cannot eliminate his utilitarianism, but he can block the source of utilitarian behavior. He understood that once he read the system reviews, he might instinctively become utilitarian, so he decided not to easily check other people's reviews in the future. At the beginning of the filming, he knew that his idea of slacking off was about to fall through. After only half a day, Rong felt that both of his legs were running and swollen. His character was Wei Monk, but due to the small size of the production team, there were not many group performances. When it came to filming war scenes, he could only bring actors together. He took off his hat and was Wei Monk. Wearing his hat was a group performance, and his task was to run back and forth in front of the camera. Not to mention him, it's just Li Yubin and He Jingjun, who played the political commissar, running when they should. Seeing Rong squatting on the ground, Li Yubin dressed in a thick cotton jacket, copying his hands and holding a script under his armpits, walked over and asked, "What kind of monk? Can you hold on?" Rong let out a breath of white air and reached out to pat his chest, saying, "It's a small matter." Perhaps because of Rong's sudden inspiration during the previous greeting, Li Yubin seemed to have a good impression of him and smiled, saying, "You kid, just hold on." The crew probably considered him joining the cast on the first day, and there were not many scenes arranged, but from the second day onwards, the intensity immediately increased. Especially the fight with Zhang Xiaojun, who played Duan Peng, made Rong suffer a lot. Originally, the crew members were quite rare, because the director said they had to really fight. After listening to teacher Wuji's explanation, the two of them gestured their moves and began to play. Most of the crew members effortlessly put down their work and prepared to watch something new. It's rare to see them filming TV dramas these days. Just a hand in hand, the two of them were playing Tai Chi like an old man in the park. After you finished your move, you were in perfect harmony with me, and your lips were accompanied by a sound. After the onlookers were stunned, they burst into laughter. Director Chen Jian slowly turned his head and looked at Wu Ji Yu Yonggang beside him, asking, "Teacher Yu, this is what you taught?" "Director, please wait a moment," said Yu Yonggang, who was black and thin, with a dry smile on his face. After Yu Yonggang finished speaking, he ran up to the two of them and said helplessly, "Brother, my two brothers, didn't you just say that the pace should be fast? Don't you bring such a playboy?" Rong smiled awkwardly. Zhang Xiaojun scratched his head and said, "Well, could you please ask the teacher to demonstrate it to us?" "All right, I'll be your opponent, you follow my rhythm and walk through it first." After finishing speaking, Yu Yonggang looked at Rong and Zhang Xiaojun and asked, "Which of you came first?" Without hesitation, Rong said, "Let me do it. Punching is too soft. You hide, I told you earlier, you fight first and then hide. It's too slow, take another beat faster." The three of them tossed and turned for over 2 hours, getting punched and kicked by each other. Chen Jiankai nodded slightly and said, "This has made a difference, but it still doesn't work. Their eyes are not aggressive. Let's practice a little longer." Seeing Rong immediately put on his posture again, Zhang Xiaojun leaned on his knee and gasped for breath, "Monk, I can't do it. Can you let me rest for a while? I really don't have any energy left." Rong was also exhausted at the moment and said, "Don't be polite between us later. Just follow what teacher you said, really fight, walk once, and then shoot directly." He made this decision for the sake of the afternoon. He has heard that this play is a tribute film and must be released next year, so the intensity is extremely high. He has exhausted his energy now and can't even run in the afternoon. Line. Let's go through it first. This time, neither of them left a hand, punching and kicking with strength. In order to satisfy the director, even if they were punched and kicked hard, they remained silent. Chen Jian looked over and saw the two of them fighting fiercely, punching to the point of flesh. He clapped his hands and said, "Not bad, each group should prepare. Everyone is quiet. Photography. Power on. Start." After nearly 2 hours of rehearsal, both of them held their breath this time and their fluency was even better than before. Card. Rong rubbed his ribs and said with a bitter smile, "Lao Zhang, why did you strike so hard? If it weren't for wearing thick clothes, I reckon your punch just now could have broken my ribs." Zhang Xiaojun pressed his arm, which had been numbed by Rong's kick, and said, "You're okay with me. My arm is swollen from the kick. Protect one, do it again." The two of them looked at Chen Jian's voice helplessly. "Come on, it's okay. I have to go through it again this time." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Journalists. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Journalists. As the filming gradually deepened, Rong deeply realized that the path of shooting stars was not suitable for him. In the past 3 months, through surfing the internet, he has also learned a lot about things he has not yet understood, and his focus is naturally on how to quickly become famous and make money. After his analysis, there are no more than 3 points. Either someone is praising, throwing money at, or feeding the show, or their acting skills far exceed those of their peers, or they are following the path of being a star. He directly overlooked the first point, just like how Zhang Fengyi and Chang Jihong evaluated him. He didn't have the capital to attract people to spend money on him. Anyone who knew the industry understood that doing so would only result in losing everything. His image is good, but it's just a good one. In terms of acting skills, even with the help of a system, improving is not an overnight task. The acquisition of experience points from the system is too labor-intensive. If he spends a whole day on set, doing nothing or wanting to get by, his experience points will not increase at all. Moreover, he doesn't have much fame, and whether he can have any scenes to film depends on Chang Jihong's mood. Even if Chang Jihong is optimistic about him and arranges more than 10 scenes a year, spending day and night on the production team, his physical condition is simply unbearable. He was originally planning to try the path of shooting stars, but after only 7 or 8 scenes, he temporarily gave up this unrealistic idea. His foundation is too poor. Every shot he makes has some real skills in his hands, and he cannot compare his imagination with someone else's ability to eat. But what makes him optimistic is that he is still young enough and the future is still very long. He wouldn't compare himself to talented actors like Xia Yu either. They just give him a treat, and comparing himself to that kind of person is just not acceptable. On the 7th day of joining the group, Su Rong ran for a week in a row and felt a bit overwhelmed. In the first 2 or 3 days, he could still recover after taking a nap, but in the past 2 days, he often ran for half a noon and his legs felt like he had been injected with lead. After a run, seeing He Jingjun, who was already in his 40s, fleeing even wilder than himself, I couldn't help but wonder if his physical fitness was not as good as this stingy guy. He Jingjun is not tall, chubby, and plays the role of political commissar Zhao Gang in the play. He is quite kind, but not very good at all, stingy. Sometimes when work starts early, several familiar actors on the set take turns treating guests, finding a restaurant to eat something hot, and drinking some wine to warm up the body. But until now, I haven't seen He Jingjun invite him once. Teacher He, aren't you tired? After running 3 times in a row, Su Rong couldn't hold back when he saw He Jingjun rushing towards him. What's the point? We're all just making up for a head without showing the camera. Who are you burying so quickly? He Jingjun chuckled and said, "What's up, monk? Don't compete anymore." Su Rong's eyes widened, and you understood in your heart. "Ha, I'll tell you something." He Jingjun stopped teasing him and said with a smile, "I'll go back tonight and soak in the bathtub for 20 minutes. Is it useful?" He Jingjun smiled and said, "Just give it a try and you'll know." Before Su Rong could experiment with what He Jingjun said, the production team welcomed a few special guests. Around 10:30, Director Chen Jian took the amplifier and shouted, "Attention everyone, attention everyone. Zhao Production invited a few media outlets today, and they are coming soon. Everyone should perform well and showcase our spirit." Su Rong didn't have any special feelings when he heard this. If the reporter comes, he can come. Anyway, he won't give himself an exclusive interview or anything. But seeing Zhang Xiaojuan's cheerful expression suddenly darken, and then turning his head, he found that most of the actors were similar, as if he had taken half a bottle of 6 flavors Rehmannia pill. His heart couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. He now has a better understanding of this circle. It is uncertain whether he will perform well or not, but without media exposure, he is designated not to make a lot of money. Despite his tired and weak calves, he immediately mustered up his energy and prepared for the next breakout scene. The plot is about the Japanese army's large-scale sweep, where Li Yunlong leads his troops to break through due to illness. In order to cover up for Zhao Gang's other troops and the common people, he engages in a fierce battle with the Japanese army. After falling ill, his subordinates abandon him to break through. In the end, Wei Monk feints Li Yunlong, who refuses to retreat and carries him to escape. Chen Jian probably also intended to help everyone recover their strength, but after resting for a while, he still didn't see the reporter coming and didn't wait anymore. He shouted, "Prepare, go first." Su Rong half bent down, waiting for Li Yubin to come up. In the previous shot, he pulled Li Yubin onto his back, but in reality, he split it into two parts during filming. Wait a moment. Outside the crew, two black vans slowly drove over. Chen Jian gestured to stop and led the production director, who was holding a stack of red envelopes, to meet them outside the set. Su Rong straightened up and turned his head to look. Looking at a group of reporters carrying long guns and short cannons getting off the car, he couldn't help but ask Li Yubin next to him and whispered, "Captain, if you say I behave better, will they report on me?" Li Yubin glared at him and said, "Monk, I have to say a few words to you. As actors, acting steadfastly is the right path. Media reports are all false." Just as he spoke, his eyes kept glancing towards the reporter. After about 10 minutes, Chen Jian returned with an unprecedentedly serious expression and said, "Get ready and start walking." The journalist who got off the car had already set up the equipment and signaled to them that they could start. Li Yubin suddenly whispered, "Act well." "What's wrong?" Li Yubin pouted angrily at the reporter who had already set up his position on the sidelines and said, "Look at the logo on your clothes, Central Media." Su Rong was stunned for a moment before understanding what Li Yubin meant by Central Media. If it were an ordinary small media, he would completely ignore it, but if this media could mention him at 7 p.m., I dare not think. Start. As soon as Su Rong bent down, he felt a sudden heaviness on his back. Li Yubin unexpectedly rushed up without waiting for him to stand firm, and he was probably too excited. He jumped a bit high, with his center of gravity quite high. But neither of them spoke up, and the reporter was beside them, and it was not a live shot, which didn't affect anything. At this time, the important thing was to showcase the spiritual outlook of the crew. Although not very energetic, Su Rong didn't hesitate. He grabbed Li Yubin's calf with both arms and ran along the path that had already been cleared by the production department. Although his center of gravity was not stable, he still felt an endless amount of strength running up and down. In case of news broadcast after running for about 20 meters, Su Rong caught a glimpse of a puddle of broken ice on the ground in front of his eyes. However, due to his body's inertia, his feet had already stepped out and could not be retracted. He didn't care and just stepped on them. But when I really stepped on it and kicked the ground hard, my feet couldn't help but slip, and my body suddenly lost balance. I rushed forward and thought to myself, "I'm going to break down. Hey!" At the moment when he was about to fall to the ground, the corner of his eye caught a glimpse of a black shadow shooting out of his head with a whoosh. Bang! The black shadow followed a parabola in mid-air, following Newton's second law. With a muffled sound, it hit the snow ditch on one side. Accompanied by this was a scream, which sounded both oppressive and painful. Su Rong, disregarding the soil on his body, quickly got up and ran downhill to help Li Yubin sit up. With a worried expression on his face, he asked, "Captain, are you okay?" At the same time, 7 or 8 members of the crew hurriedly ran over and helped Li Yubin up, patting the snow and mud on his body. It was probably because the clothes were thick, and Li Yubin didn't see any major issues. He just shook his head slightly, as if he hadn't recovered from the moment before. "Captain, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I slipped on my feet just now and didn't stand firmly, so I just..." After a while, Li Yubin regained his senses and looked at Su Rong, who had been apologizing all along. He wanted to get angry, but most of the time he knew he didn't mean it. He could only say with a bitter face, "Brother, if you want to become famous, I won't stop you, but you can't fall and kill me either." Upon hearing Li Yubin's address to him, Su Rong knew that Li Yubin was feeling uncomfortable with the fall he had just made. He quickly said, "Captain, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to do it. Do you think that's okay? Kick me twice to relieve my anger." As he spoke, he turned his back, pursed his buttocks, twisted his head, and said to Li Yubin, "Captain, kick it. Use as much force as you can. Go ahead, go ahead." Li Yubin saw him pouting his buttocks and pretending to kick, but he didn't really put in any effort. He withdrew his leg and said, "Let's play on the side." Seeing that Li Yubin had nothing to do, the whole team finally calmed down. Director Chen Jian also secretly felt fortunate. Fortunately, the actors on the set were not big shots, and they often joked and got to know each other well. If we had really invited a big shot, the fall just now would not have ended today. The production director and Su Rong apologized to Li Yubin one by one, and the road was not cleaned up. The production director also bears responsibility. Su Rong felt quite regretful for his hot head just now. He didn't act like he didn't say anything and even lost his adult. "Captain, why do you still hurt? Let me rub it for you." Li Yubin originally intended to refuse, but he did fall quite lightly just now and snorted, "It's not comfortable anywhere. You almost numbed me just now. I told you earlier that acting is the right way. If you don't listen, if you don't wear thick clothes in the cold, I'll have to give you a fall." Su Rong chuckled and said, "I made a mistake with the team leader. There won't be another time." After the farce just now, Su Rong dared not think of anything else and acted honestly. But Li Yubin was like an old lady with a broken mouth. When someone came from the group, he immediately felt bitter. "Monk, this guy is crazy and almost killed me. You have to be careful." Su Rong could only smile bitterly about this, who let him tell the truth. He also knew that Li Yubin was just joking, but this taught him a lesson. The shortcut was not easy to take, and it became easy to say. If he didn't be careful when walking and slipped, he would have to pay a huge price. On the 10th day of joining the group, the experience value of the system once again rose to 99 points. Looking at the light curtain, Su Rong couldn't help but feel a little excited. With one more point, his comprehensive evaluation will reach D+, and one of the 5 evaluations will also be improved to C. The reason why his experience points have increased so quickly is related to his thorough understanding of the script in the past 3 months. Not only has he memorized his own role, but also the lines of others. He has a clear concept of how to act, and every time he takes a shot, he compares and judges his guess based on Chen Jian's reaction. He had a vague premonition in his heart that the next 3 improvements would each be a huge leap. After his observation, in group performances, there are basically no actors who can achieve a rating of C, only some special actors have it, and it is not common, while on the contrary, professional actors with a background in science generally start with C. Except for those with cross-industry development, most of them are in the nature of gambling. He vaguely felt that C was a threshold, and once he crossed it, he would step into the ranks of professional actors. Even if he went to perform in groups, he could gradually make a special appointment. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Reasons. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Reasons. As the weather became colder and colder, Su Rong's scenes were slowly filmed in half. As usual, during the break, Su Rong opened the system. Performance Training System Name. Su Rong Emoji. D Line. D Limbs. D Eyes. D Rhythm. C Comprehensive Evaluation. D+ Experience Value. 22 out of 100 Honor Value. 25 out of 100 Trait. None. He added the opportunity for the previous upgrade to the rhythm, and based on his past experience, the impact of rhythm on the performance is holistic. Although it cannot directly elevate the expression of expressions and lines, it can exert a certain influence and improve the overall coordination of the performance. As the rhythm increased to C, he felt like there was a slight change in his acting, but it seemed like there was no change. However, it was evident that the frequency of NG was indeed much lower. Prepare everything. Upon hearing the shout, Su Rong took off the locomotive from his head and set it aside for filming. The next scene to be filmed is the scene of Wei Monk accompanying Li Yunlong to attend Hirata Ichiro's birthday banquet. In Su Rong's view, this scene is one of the most difficult scenes in his play. Unlike in the past, it only requires a frown and a frown to get through, because he wants to show the way Wei Monk has never seen the world before, but he cannot be too deliberate. He has been pondering this scene for 2 or 3 days and has some thoughts in his mind, but he is not sure whether the director is satisfied or not. Li Yubin sat aside and saw that Su Rong didn't mention rehearsals at all. He said seriously, "Monk, I think we should rehearse a few times first. What if something goes wrong in the middle?" Su Rong is not foolish. Once the filming starts, he will have to eat and drink recklessly. One go may not pass, and if he rehearses a few more times, he may be able to hold on to a show for half a life. "Captain, why do you keep pushing me? Let's talk about the situation. You just said, did you get angry when you fell? Which one is so fierce? You just want to become famous, and you've learned how to make a fool of yourself. Isn't that all right with you? Actually, thanks to your young and strong body, Captain. If teacher He or teacher Zhang falls like that, it's designated to cause an accident. Hey, I believe what you said, I'll tell you." The whole room is quiet. Li Yubin quickly paused. Su Rong first picked up his chopsticks, but then put them down. Wei Monk was a rough person and had not eaten much meat and fish before, so using chopsticks was not suitable. Start. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Rong had already grabbed the chicken leg and bitten off most of it in one bite. At the same time, his other hand was not idle, and he grabbed a handful of peanuts and swallowed them in his mouth. Because he ate too much and choked, he was busy drinking the water from his glass in one gulp. He didn't stop either, constantly feeding peanuts into his mouth and stuffing chicken legs into his mouth with one hand. With such a scene, he couldn't hold on to it a few times. Li Yubin glanced behind him and whispered, "What did this kid say?" He wiped his nose and tears. Su Rong didn't lift his eyes and said vaguely, "I didn't hear everything. It seems that he wants to be his mother." "He still has a mother. I thought he jumped out of a crevice in a stone." Su Rong nodded and casually picked up the plate containing peanuts, as if about to pour it into his mouth. Li Yubin reached out and grabbed it, saying, Hey, why did you even pick up the plate? Card. Over. Li Yubin put down the plate and looked at him with a strange expression. After a while, he wondered, "Monk, to be honest, haven't you eaten well for a long time?" Sitting diagonally opposite, Zhang Guang entered the group 2 days later than Su Rong, but he knew Su Rong's level of expertise and was an amateur. But for the one just now, Su Rong's rhythm gave him a quite comfortable feeling. It was a bit faster, but in this scene, it was just right and fast. He couldn't help but ask, "Xiao Su, choking on that was quite interesting. Did you figure it out yourself?" Su Rong followed his chest and realized that he had been eating a bit urgently just now. When he calmed down, he smiled and said, "No, I just ate too fast, I'm really choking." Ha ha ha. After laughing, Li Yubin suddenly said suspiciously, "No, you're making progress a bit fast. It's only been a few days now, and it seems like you've completely changed your personality compared to when you first started." Su Rong smiled awkwardly as he looked at the slightly increased experience points. Regarding his business abilities, he had received too much criticism and was not used to being praised. After staying on the set for a month, Su Rong drank too much for the first time in his life. His role was cancelled because he died in the end, and the team even gave him a red envelope of 1,000 yuan. Originally, Su Rong planned to pack his luggage as usual and leave quietly. But Li Yubin took this matter as a pretext and shouted, "The monks are leaving, shouldn't our political commissar invite a guest to be strong?" He Jingjun was brutally slaughtered. As Su Rong vomited profusely in the bathroom, he swore never to drink again. He really likes the atmosphere of the production team of Sword of Light, there is no difference between being cautious and cautious. He runs together during the day, finishes work early at night, finds a small shop on the roadside, orders a few dishes, and can drink for half a day with a blush and a thick neck. But if there is a choice, he will no longer just take on the show for the sake of money in the future. Of course, the biggest gain in over a month was that both rhythm and dialogue had been improved to C, and there were also 17 experience points. Sleeping in a daze until noon the next day, Rong greeted a few people he usually knew and left the crew. Go home. Next, he plans to go home for the Chinese New Year first, and then return to the capital, doing tutoring to earn money while preparing for exams. He no longer has high expectations about whether he can still receive the play. During the filming process, he met Chang Jihong, who was also his nominal agent. She is here to visit the class. But it has nothing to do with him. The reason why Chang Jihong came over is because there is a girl in the group named Sunli, who has been a highly acclaimed actress in the company for the past 2 years. He learned a lesson from the female actors in the group this time, and if he could avoid contact, he would not even approach them, even holding a respectful and distant attitude. Women are too troublesome. Therefore, although he is also an actor from Shanghai Run, he did not say a few words to Sunli during his time together. Taking a look at Chang Jihong's idle time chatting with Sunli, Rong greeted Chang Jihong, as he would have to point to Mr. Chang to make a living in the future. Chang Jihong seemed to have forgotten about him, and after a while, he suddenly realized that he was an actor signed by his own company. He even noticed a hint of surprise in Chang Jihong's expression, but he couldn't come up with a reason for his surprise. During the previous interview, Chang Jihong's reaction made him anticipate the situation today, but for a while, he didn't have a good solution. If you sign up for a brokerage firm, it's usually not too difficult to play a role if the company is enthusiastic about it, but if the broker forgets about him, it's basically a dead end. He has an immature idea in his mind, but the specific implementation will have to wait until after the Chinese New Year. Rong pushed open 2 creaking wooden doors and entered the courtyard. He saw an old man sitting in a gray apron under the sun at the entrance of the main house, with a bundle of dried chili peppers resting on it. The old man has graying hair and is wearing a blue Zhongshan suit with rounded corners, with 2 smiling lines printed on both sides of his nose. Seeing him enter the door, the old man was stunned for a moment and said, "Hey." After a while, the smile on the old man's face gradually deepened. He placed the chili pepper plant on the ground and quickly picked up the cracked branches and leaves on his apron, asking, "You're back, have you eaten?" As he spoke, the old man got up and hobbled towards the kitchen. Halfway through, he turned his head and asked, why did he even shave his hair? Rong chuckled and threw his luggage under the nearby shed. He ran up to the old man and whispered, "Sir, let me tell you something. I went to film and earned a lot of money." The old man looked at his excited expression and didn't ask how much money he had earned. Instead, he said, "Is it enough to go to school?" "That's enough. Enough is enough." The old man seemed to suddenly remember something and walked towards the main room, saying, "You're back at the right time. A while ago, I asked Aunt you when you'll be back. There are 2 mooncakes left for you in the cabinet. You can put them on the mat first, and I'll give you a bowl of noodles later." Middle, sir. After spending the spring festival with his grandfather at home, Rong didn't dare to stay any longer. He packed his luggage and arrived in the capital. Performing arts is the top priority, but not the entire process. Physical and vocal music also play a significant role in the exam. He just doesn't have any strengths in these 2 aspects, and he doesn't have much confidence in passing the art exam. Therefore, he plans to apply for both the Beijing Film and Television University and the Central Academy of Drama at the same time. In case he passes one, he will make a profit. If he fails both, he will honestly take the college entrance examination and seek opportunities in the future. He doesn't have the capital to burn his bridges and fight for another year. On the 3rd day of arriving in the capital, he knocked on the door of Guoxi's family. Although Chang Jihong is his nominal agent, the two of them say less than 10 words. On the contrary, although Guo Si is called an assistant, the actor like him who usually comes into contact with the most is actually this chubby assistant. Su Rong delivered the local specialties he brought from his hometown, but didn't sit down. After chatting for a few moments, he didn't stay much longer. He only met her once and didn't have much to talk about. Upon leaving Guo Si's house, Su Rong did not immediately leave. Instead, he sat on a bench outside the community, holding his phone and watching the people and cars on the way. In the room, Guo Si opened a box of iron stick yam that Su Rong had specially brought from his hometown, which was not exquisitely packaged. In the box, on top of a bundle of iron sticks and yams, there is an envelope that is neither too thick nor too thin. Guo Si was momentarily stunned before reaching out his chubby little hand to pick up the envelope. The envelope was not sealed and, as she had guessed at first glance, contained a stack of red and oily Chinese yuan, not much, estimated to be several thousand yuan. She hesitated for a moment, sealed the envelope, placed it next to the gift box, picked up her phone, and was about to call. But when she found the number, she instinctively glanced at the envelope. In the end, she slowly closed her phone again. Su Rong held his phone tightly and waited for nearly half an hour. The phone had neither a phone call nor a text message. In the end, he turned around and glanced at the unit building where Guo Si was located before getting up and leaving. Before knocking on the door, he hesitated inwardly, both concerned about money and not ashamed of his actions. But he remembers the lesson taught to him by Qindong Mo, that only with giving can there be gains. Guo Si is not related to him, so there is no reason to help him without reason. So he can only create his own reasons. End of this chapter.